The following podcast is brought to you by Ice Giant and their Pro Siphon Elite Cooler. Is also brought to you by Vite Ramen and their high-protein, delicious ramen products. And it is also brought to you by CDKeyOffer.com that gets you great deals on Windows keys and other products. You can find links in the description and the proper offer codes for all of these sponsors, and we'll talk about them later. But for now, let's just get on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I am joined by one of those hosts that I am guessing does not need much of an introduction for most people watching this, but please introduce yourself.
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me. Gordon Ung or if you like to say it, Gordon Mah Ung with PCWorld. Full introductions. I go back. I'm one of the last old timers left. I can't think of too many that are still doing this. I've been doing this since the late 1990s and continuously reviewing hardware ever since then. So I've seen many people come and go, and I'm basically an old timer. So I'm a fossil still doing this, which is it's kind of fun because the perspective is very different, I think, than some people that are new to this.
Well, I mean, you look like one of the youngest fossils I've ever seen, so don't sell yourself short here.
Yeah, that's why I shaved the head, because you don't see all the gray hair. So it's from all the late night benchmarking. It will change your hair color. Like, you know how the president comes after, like the end of their first
age
4
like
years,
20 years and 4.
They've aged for, yeah. Benchmarking will do that to you. And then, for people who don't know, I go all the way back to, I started with Boot Magazine, which then turned into Maximum PC Magazine. I spent a long, long time at Maximum PC at first Imagine Media. Then that turned into Future. And I was there for quite a while, left probably when did I leave? I guess the mid 2016, around that 2014 era. And then
LinkedIn says 2014, I think.
Okay, 2014. I can't remember. That's a problem when you get to my age.
Well, that's almost a decade ago already.
I know. It's kind of like, it feels like I just got here. But the actual funny thing is I was an intern at PCWorld in 1993 or something like that. And I actually found, because we have all the old issues around, I grabbed one of those issues and it listed me as an intern. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I have it on my desk somewhere.
So, yeah, that must have, because it says you became a reporter at ComputerWorld in 1997, right? At least on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And you were a intern at where you are now, though, right before that. But before that, you were actually, from what I'm seeing here, a police reporter, right? So I'm curious, what made you start in police reporting, and why did you migrate to computer gaming eventually?
So again, I was an intern in the early 90s at PCWorld, and they're like, hey, you're great, you're a nerd, we'd like you to come back. But at the time, there was civil unrest, let's say, in the city of San Francisco. And, I went to school to be a newspaper reporter, which is these things they used to print on paper with text in black and white, and they would distribute them in the morning.
Sounds weird.
Who don't know. Yeah, it's weird, right? But, and it was like the thought of being in a cubicle watching, people riot on the street was, at the time, because I was much younger, that just wasn't as exciting as doing daily reporting. So I decided to get a newspaper job as I had intended to. And that was a blast, being most of it was, general assignment or being a cop reporter, which is just amazing. It's just a cool job to have at a daily newspaper. It's a, small to medium-sized daily in the Bay Area. And then after a few years of that, you realize, newspaper industry is an old industry, and the people who run it still treat you like it's 1728 or something like that, and they still want to pay you at those same pay rates. I mean, it really it's what you call a young man's game. You got to be able to survive on no money to work at a newspaper. And eventually, it's like, you know what, this is not that much fun. So then I went back to I had a bunch of friends who did the same thing. They're like, yeah, okay, we're done with this. One of them got a job at ComputerWorld, and then they got me over there, and then it was not too consumery for me. So then I had a friend who was working at Boot, and he's like, we got an opening. I went over. That was the online editor at Boot Magazine. So it was a natural fit because, I was always a computer nerd. And the good lesson here is for parents, if you're listening to this audio podcast, buy your kid that computer hardware. I know you're like, oh, this is just a waste of money. We should do something else. But my parents bought me a VIC-20 from Toys R Us, and that's how I got it. It's like, oh, this is awesome, right? And just like that started the whole journey. And you buy the hardware for your kids, and they get interested in it, and you never know what happens. So,
yeah. So, I guess actually, before I get into that kind of more getting into gaming talk, I do have a question here from Sarcastro I wanted to throw at you. He says, hi, Tom and Gordon. He says, well, at university, I interned as a crime analyst in Akron, Ohio, and had several event-filled ride-alongs. Gordon, did you do any ride-alongs and working as a police beat reporter? Any crazy stories at all if you did?
I did it a few times. I think probably the only time that sort of stands out was it was Concord Police Department, and doing a ride along just for kicks, because you have to do it once in a while. And they got into like a foot pursuit or something, and I was like there with them, like we're climbing up on this building, like what the hell am I doing here? I have like a pen and a flashlight, a little tiny mini mag light at the time. It's like but that was kind of fun. Most of the excitement is being a police reporter means you get sent to all the crazy things, and that was where the bulk of the I don't want to say it was exciting, because there's a lot of adrenaline going. It
wasn't boring.
It wasn't boring, and it was oftentimes, you had your job is to go out there, get the facts, talk to people, the kind of stuff, and you have to be into it. I was into it, but as we had one of the graphic artists at the newspaper is like, man, when you have a good day, that means somebody else had a really effed up day. It's like, yeah, and it's unfortunate, and it really is, it's a hard job, because you have to sort of put your emotions into a box for it sometimes. And, I think people, police officers these days, they don't understand, like, gosh, they seem like so jaded but the things that the average police officer sees every day from humanity, it does great on you. So you have to be able to function as a human being. You got to be able to put that all on box and control it. But there's a reason why people you get kind of like, you've seen it all eventually. So,
yeah, I mean, that's one thing, like, bear with me here. I'll find a way to connect this to what you said. But like, when I do leaks, when I try to like do more and more reportery like videos on my YouTube channel, I think people sometimes think I want to be negative, but my positive videos with positive products coming out perform far better, get far more subscribers than the negative ones. I don't enjoy telling people something bad's going to happen to a product or to a company ever. Selfishly, it is not as many views. It's just, if something's going to happen that I think is going to affect PC gamers and it's negative, I guess I got to tell you. But I would say that's probably a huge difference that you've enjoyed moving from police reporting to gaming is, although there are negative stories, and though sometimes you might feel compelled to report on something that might benefit you to report on when one of these companies is having a bad day, it's usually happier. Whereas police stuff, it's almost always involving something bad, right?
Yeah, I would agree, because I mean, oftentimes you write things and you have to tell the truth. You can't, is that kind of that old joke, like, oh, everybody's an angel? That, believe me, every single family member will say that person's an angel, and you go talk to neighbors, like, this guy's like a total dirtbag and whatever. And, you can't call him a dirtbag, but you could definitely say, like, well, he's got like, this guy's like a, four-timer for these things, you have to mention in the story. And believe me, the family takes it really personally, but you have to, again, that sort of factors into maybe what happened there. So you can't simply self-edit out because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And I get you there, because you get something explosive and it's bad news. That's really not your problem. It's your job is to tell people what the truth is, right? So.
Yeah, well, on this note a little bit, Dino999 writes in, and he says, hello, Tom and Gordon. To me, this podcast episode feels like a meetup of essentially old age journalism versus new age. Gordon being in the tech press industry for essentially his entire life. And what are your thoughts on how things are done now? Do you miss the days of when people would read and write whole articles on products, or are you in favor of the more modern video style reviews that we see online as Tech Tips, Hardware Unboxed, and Gamers Nexus? I'm curious to see where you acquired your inspiration for the field as well, Tom, and if you can remember who you looked to back in the day from old age journalism that helped shape the way you approach your channel. Well, you're the guest. You please go first.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking with Greg Viederman, who was the hardware editor at PC Gamer and later on the editor in chief. We were talking about like the good old days, and it really was like, and he used this phrase like, God, it was like, it was weird because you were like, and back then, really, there was a non-tech. Tom was around. There wasn't too many. There was, Voodoo, and there's
I used to read a lot of Tom's hardware, yeah.
And there was Sharky, and there were like a lot of them were gone. But he's like, for print back then, it was a big deal. So the old days of actual, literally magazine paper printed out, sent out distribution was a big deal for everybody. So, a lot of people like really wanted to get on your good side. But as far as like the way it was done back then, it was cool because there was a certain craft. There was a hard limitation. Like honestly, when you do a review on the website and you're like, oh, I can write 10,000 words. You think it's freeing, but actually it's really tough to write 800 words than it is to just go on forever. So that makes it very difficult. Do I miss the old days? Yeah, because it was just awesome because it was just very special. Magazines were very special. And then also when you think about online, again, Tom's and Anon back then, I think also that has kind of like those days are feeling like everybody's under more pressure there. But I still like written reviews in a lot of ways. And I will say that selfishly, because when I go to Tom's Hardware, I go to one of our own reviews, or I go to Anon is like, it's really easy to go to the end and read the conclusion, right? We all do this. So like, I'm very selfish about like, oh, I love this. Cause like, it's really hard to watch, Steve cranks out 2 hours of videos. It's like, it's really hard to compress it all into like a simple conclusion in a lot of ways. So that is harder. And as far as like a lot of people, especially a lot of text-based people that are online, there's always been this sort of rivalry between, the so-called YouTubers and the people who do, text. Some people can get kind of snooty about it because like, oh, we're doing journalism here. And my feeling is like, journalism is just simply you talking, me talking. And as long as we're factually correct, that is what it is. And we're not misleading people. And I honestly love what is being done today. I think back to the late 90s, and basically the tools to test were basically like rubbing rocks together compared to what everybody does today. And there's just, you can get all these different points of view, and it's all dynamic. It's all, on video, and I love it. Again, I've always been one of those people, like, I don't look down on, YouTubers, because honestly, there's a lot of YouTubers doing it better than, frankly, the old world would have ever done it. So I don't have any of the whole, us versus them thing. And I think there's awesome stuff being done in text as well. But, those golden days of a magazine coming out once a month was incredibly special, I think. And it was a golden era for PC gaming. If you think about the late 1990s, PC gaming had just been born in a lot of ways.
And it was getting good. It wasn't really like good. Annoying. It was good.
Yeah, and it really was the innovation, because back then, you're looking at late 90s, like a beige box. And like if you put like 2 Voodoo 2s, a sound card, and an Ethernet card in there, like, oh, that was baller Alienware, right? That was it. Like, that's all you had to do. It could look like the wires hanging out everywhere inside, but that was what was seen as, an incredible gaming computer back there. And then you got to like, like Voodoo PC, which, is one of the early boutique builders. Like, their whole thing was like, we're going to put a window in the case, and it was incredible. It was like, oh my god, it's so mind-blowing. Alienware's like, we're going to paint our system like green. It's like, oh my, it's like paint on it. I mean, we look back now and like, that's ridiculous. But
yeah, that's the same era as like when like Game Boy, Nintendo 64, and a bunch of companies were doing this. Now I think it honestly looks cheap, but at the time it looked so cool. This clear plastic. Whoa, I can see everything inside of the Game Boy. And then every company was doing it with their electronics.
Yeah, no, it's just funny to see like that evolution of like to what it is today. Because even like the cheapest POS $65 case is like a joy to build in versus something from back then. And we've just gotten so advanced. We're very spoiled, honestly, by what PC gaming has turned into.
Mm-hmm. Quick Jumper writes in and he says, "Hey, Tom and Gordon, I've got two questions. When you look at AMD, Nvidia, and Intel, how are they evolving in your eyes? To me, it seems that Nvidia and AMD are slowly bulking up and trying to diversify their portfolio, while Intel is almost doing the opposite, trying to cut fat and focus on the most important parts of its business to stay competitive as those companies get bigger. From my perspective, it seems that all three companies are actually kind of converging into a similar point in terms of financial power and technology. Does that excite you? What does it mean for the market?"
You wanna take that one, or you want me to talk out of?
I mean, if you want me to give my perspective first, what I would say is it means that within 5 years, none of these companies can fuck around anymore. Like they can't. You can't. Like if you do that, if Intel thinks they can just pinch off a terrible graphics card and it will sell, it won't. If Nvidia thinks they can try to make some mobile gaming platform and it'll do well, it won't. If AMD thinks they can just shove, which I think they're being much more strategic, even though they have quite a diverse set of products. If AMD thinks they can just shove out some SoC, and because it has the graphics and the CPU and it's hard for other people to make those, it'll do well. Not necessarily. Intel's making APUs now too. None of these companies can just, or that AMD can just make something with the highest clock speed or the highest teraflops. Doesn't matter. Nvidia's working so hard to make their software a selling point on its own. It means all of these companies can't be lazy about anything they work on anymore. And I think that's a good thing because we talk about divisions, product lines, stuff being canceled now. It seems like a lot is. Maybe. But I mean, what happened to the Mantle? What happened to FX Audio for like the audio stuff from AMD? What happened to, I mean, there's all these other initiatives Nvidia had, AMD had that went nowhere because they didn't need it to. They just wanted a marketing thing on a box. And so I think though some things are going to keep getting canceled and fail, that's always going to happen. I think we're going to see a lot of these companies be much, much, much more careful if they want to succeed, at least in what they launch. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. Because you can't, you can't screw around anymore. And then definitely this has been a particularly bad patch for them. I mean, of the three companies, they're the ones that have suffered the most in the eyes of probably consumers and their customers because they were simply unable to deliver. The funny thing is this is not new. I've seen this pattern before. I mean, strictly from a consumer perspective, but they've done this before, like at least twice that I know of in my own lifetime of covering it. Like where like AMD comes out of like AMD, the company that just has always sucked, comes out and just clocks them, and AMD will have the lead for 4 cycles, 4 years, 5 years, and then Intel comes back. I mean, the first time though, it feels like it's this typical thing where Intel has been so dominant and so big that they always get distracted. I mean, I think back to like the late 90s, early 2000s, where it's like, hey, we're going to do wireless. We want to because remember back then it was like, oh my God, you got to be Cisco. You need to compete with because Cisco's the world, right? They're going to run the world. They got into networking and they just all kinds of these crazy side gigs because they wanted to they had basically wiped all the competition out because they were just simply that good, and they're like, how it is with any large company. Like, you think your executives are like, hey, yeah, you keep giving me money because we need to stay ahead of these competitors. Like that's not how it works at any company. Because what happens is executives go like, well, you got this handled. I'm going to give money to drone department. We're going to do smartwatches and just all these kind of things. And Intel
Internet of Things.
Internet of Things. I mean, just like all these kind of like, and then they always, I think the CPU division is always one of the things like they really do so well, and then what happens is upstairs somebody's like, oh, we don't have to worry about them, we got this handled. And like any large company, you don't get the resources you need to stay ahead of everybody, and it happens again, right? This again, Zen came out and like it felt like out of nowhere and just clocked them again. And this has happened at least twice, right? Athlon 64, the original FX parts. They just like, God, the original Athlon, the K7s. I mean, they were like, how embarrassing was it for AMD to beat Intel to a shipping 1 gigahertz processor? Just stupid round number, but that was a huge embarrassment to Intel. That was on the front page that was on the cover of our magazine. It's like 1 gigahertz, and you got AMD on there. These people, as much as there's definitely it's like any large company. There's people who don't care. We all work with them. They don't care what they do. And then there's people like don't like to lose. And that was hugely embarrassing to them because it's like, this is something they think they should win, and AMD beat them there. Right. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. What you said that we've seen this before with AMD, hitting Intel. I've heard this from someone from Tech Deals, and also Josh Walrath from PC Perspective when he came on. And over time, I've made this argument. I made it again, and I'm making it again. And as time goes on, I think my argument makes more and more sense. I don't think this is like before. I mean, I think you could have said it was like before a few years ago, but I'm sorry. Like the AMD kind of botched the dominance they had in the 2000s, from my memory. Like
right.
They were ahead, and they're like $1,000 per CPU. AMD hasn't really done that. They're not charging $1,000 for the 7950X. And it's because they know they can't, but I think someone didn't tell them they can't do that 20 years ago or 15 years ago, because they did that, and then Intel just comes out with Core 2 and it's just over. I'm not seeing that right now. It seems like AMD is staying focused far better than they were before. If you look at the market share they took back then too, it wasn't close to where they've got to now, and it seems like they're going to keep taking it. So I would agree with you a few years ago, but don't you think we're at a point where it seems like I don't think AMD is backing down? I think they're going to stay in this fight much longer than they did last time if they don't win it. I mean, that's way premature to say, but
Yeah, I would agree, because it looks, you never know, because Intel has pulled a rabbit out of the hat many, many times before, but this was an argument Intel or AMD made to me after Zen came out. The first Zen launched, and they were like, in the past, what would happen is we'd catch up to them. We'd have a few good years. Intel has always been the master of process fabrication. They would get this huge leap, and they would just, again, blow our doors off, and then we could do nothing because we couldn't keep up with them on process and fab. And the argument was, and this is from AMD's CTO, I can't think of his name for some reason right now, unfortunately, sorry. He was like, they can't do that anymore. Moore's law is slowing down. If not, as you would say it's dead.
I would say it's been dead for 20 years.
I mean, you and Jensen agree on that, right? But
yeah, we don't agree on a lot, but we agree on that.
No, you agree on that one though, right? But it's AMD was like, they can't run away anymore. They can't just simply like, hey, pull a rabbit or a hat, bam. And honestly, over the last, that was right after the original Zen came out, and we have not seen Intel pull that rabbit out of the hat yet, right? So they haven't. You never know. I mean, it's one of the things you don't underestimate Intel. I mean, a lot of people do these days. They burn a lot of the credibility, but maybe Meteor Lake is going to be like, we don't know, right? So, but at the same time, it has proven to be right. AMD traditionally would, this is the time like AMD would like, Intel would say later, and then, but they haven't done it yet. So is that Moore's law, the difficulty here, getting that process working, Well,
yeah. And from what I know about the Royal Core project, which I guess is going to find its way into Arrow Lake products first, probably, maybe a couple others before that, but probably Arrow Lake first. And then there's also another lake I know of right after that. I'm not thinking of Nova Lake for people listening. There's another one actually. Like they've got this pretty cool stuff coming It's just, when does it come out? Same with Meteor Lake. Meteor Lake came out at the beginning of next year. I don't think Intel would have a problem being competitive with Phoenix, if not beating it, at least being competitive. But coming out next to Strix, I'm like, But it will be better. We'll see. Let me ask you this. I like to ask all my guests the first time they come on the channel this question. I was going to ask you about the eras of PC gaming, but I think that we've already kind of talked about that. Like, I feel like we're going to hit a new era in a few years, but the era we're in now, I feel like kind of started with Zen. And I'm just kind of wondering, what were your expectations for Zen before it came out? Because I can give my own answer. Again, I've given it before, but I think a lot of people expected everything. A lot of people didn't expect a whole lot. What did you expect it to be? Did you expect it to be as successful as it was? Was it better than you thought it would be?
The funny thing is, so, Intel, they just had their Intel Innovation event.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2017, Intel was still doing IDF, Intel Developer Forum. It was a big PC nerd off, right? And it was awesome. So they do that in San Francisco in Moscone Center, and AMD had set up across the street from Moscone Center, and like, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to come by on after the Intel thing and stop by. And so I was like, okay, we show up, and you just had James Pryor on. So James Pryor was running the demo that night, and he was showing, they had a Blender a workload, and they also ran like Cinebench too. And I remember, like, and my expectations, and again, I know there's a lot of AMD super fans that are like, oh my God, you're so wrong, Gordon, on Bulldozer, whatever. Those things were dogs. I'm sorry, they were dogs. They just like accept it. That thing was a dog.
There's no such thing as bad products, just bad pricing. But the pricing had to be really low for that product to be good. I mean, I agree.
Yeah, no, it was like, but you always get the like, oh, but we had more cores. Like, okay, that was underperforming Sandy Bridge. Okay, so James Pryor is like running the demo, and he kicks off like, holy shit, like, this is like a real part, and we just had Broadwell E launch, I think, or Broadwell. I can't remember. Like, it was right around the age of Broadwell. Yeah. And it was just like, this thing is not a joke, because I mean, honestly, I just sort of, AMD had been this sort of sad sack company. Like, they get kicked to the curb by Intel and they stay there. And Zen came out and was like, whoa. And I actually turned to him, I gave him a thumbs up. It's like, whoa. Like, yeah, we're both like, and he did this big, shit-eating smile, because it was like, yeah, this is like, we got something good here. And who would have known that Zen would have just really, I would agree with you, Zen really kicked off this age of it. They democratized cores, because, Intel really was like, quad core. You want to pay for 6 or 8. That's our big socket, HEDT. In Intel's defense, though, I will say they tried to push more cores because they like to sell more expensive CPUs. There were no takers, right? Nobody cared. Developers didn't care, because until Intel was like, are you going to sell this 8-core CPU for $300 or $400? It was like, no, right? So, but once AMD showed up with the original Zen, it was like, holy shit, this is 8 cores, this is low price. And then, they just like, after that, then you did the, the Threadripper and just all these kind of like, they were just giving away cores. Like, just the fact that everybody has it now, it's like, it's actually kind of worthless in a lot of ways, in some ways, because we've already sort of surpassed, like, does anybody really need a 7950X or 12900K? Probably not. I mean, there are people who do, but the average person does not. And they really, they really just use that. I agree with you, because we are fundamentally in this thing where, like, the value of cores is like just dirt cheap. Everybody has 8. You can get an 8-core, 6-core for like nothing these days, or more. I mean, look at what we're getting with out of Intel's hybrid designs, right? So you're just getting more, and it's going to be awesome. But yeah, I go back to that. I think about that day and that night. It was like, holy shit. You were like, oh my God, this is like not a suck product from AMD, right? And
not really only that, but it's like moving the ball forward in a way I didn't think anyone, because I thought best case, and I don't know if best case, but like what I was expecting was that it would be like Sandy Bridge IPC or a little better than that, and then run it like 3.5 gigahertz. And that'd be cool. It's like, hey, if they can give you a Sandy Bridge 8 core for $500 that uses way less energy, they're competitive again, at least at some things, and they're offering something this market just doesn't have. But then they're like, no, actually, it's 4 gigahertz. It's actually, better than Haswell's IPC, and we're not that far behind in gaming. And I was like, oh no, they're not just offering something we didn't have before. Intel's in danger of being behind at everything, just like that. And it's so funny. People say, why isn't there a new Threadripper platform? Why did Intel leave HEDT for so long? Which they should have some new stuff coming out soon. It's like AMD beat them so badly that they didn't bother competing, and AMD doesn't see a point in launching something that's cheaper than a workstation when you can get 16 cores on desktop. I think people forget that the way HEDT used to work, the reason Intel was bringing a 10-core Broadwell E back then is because their server chips were like 22 cores or something, and their desktop chips were only 4. They weren't even halfway in between that. That would have been 12 cores. And now you look at Threadripper at 64 cores. That's just absurd. Like, that's not even halfway to server. It's the same.
Right. It's nuts. It's just insane if you think about it. I mean, that's why you have to. You're right. I don't know what we should call it, post-Zen era or Zen era, or post-Zen era probably sounds bad because it sounds like you're over. But I mean, really, the core count wars has been awesome for consumers and everybody. Now it just, if the developers could catch up, it'd be nice.
Yeah, and I think we're about to enter into the accelerator war era, but which you can already see with like the Flow accelerator and Lovelace and like all these accelerators that are going to be inside of Phoenix, which will have an AI engine and Meteor Lake. But the RTX 4090 is so big that I was considering digging one of my old compact liquid coolers from storage to cool my processor if I were to test the 4090 in my desktop. And unfortunately, I found out that at some point it had broken pretty badly. And so I guess I'll just need to buy a new one if I go down that route. But, whatever I end up using, this highlighted the dangers of liquid cooling. They're dangers that the Ice Giant Pro Siphon Elite does not need to worry about. Today's sponsor is brought to you by Ice Giant and their Pro Siphon Elite that uses thermosiphon technology, which was initially developed for use for industrial applications to make an incredibly innovative phase change cooler that performs like the best liquid coolers on the market, and it has the reliability and simplicity of an air cooler. And if you support this company, Ice Giant, you're supporting a startup in Austin, Texas that stands by their product with a unprecedented 10-year warranty. So whether you're looking to cool Zen 4, Raptor Lake, Threadripper, or some upcoming Xeon Extreme product from Intel, know that Ice Giant has you covered without requiring liquid cooling for these beasts. And their product is available at dozens of retailers globally, and you can go to Amazon right now and use a coupon code to get an additional $25 off. Click the link in the description to buy the Ice Giant Pro Siphon Elite, and if you do, you're also supporting Moore's Law is Dead. Consider the Pro Siphon Elite today. Let me ask you, Zen 4 just came out, there's been a lot of consternation about if it should have had more than 16 cores, to which I'm of mixed opinions about, because it just depends which argument you're making, but we'll get to that. What do you think of Zen 4? Did it live up to what you were expecting? Do you think it's a good product? It seems like it was selling bad at first, but now it's starting to gain a little momentum. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it actually it over-delivered, kind of honestly. I didn't think it was going to perform as well as it did, because 5950X is a really good part. But 7950X obviously destroys the 5950X, right? And of course, the reason is they are pushing power that they were not doing with 5950, right? Because they had to put the pedal to the metal to get to where they are now. I am overall, I think it's a pretty decent part. I think it's, it overperformed expectations. I didn't think it was going to be as good as it was. Obviously, the problem is it's the transition period. I mean, I honestly think the reason why isn't it selling as well is because it's just a bigger buy-in to go to these new parts. And then there's no low-cost boards for the bottom end. And that is where the bulk of the market is. Most people are buying lower-end parts. They're not buying the Ryzen 9s, right? So not having that lower-end, budget stuff hurt it. And I think that's pretty normal, though, because it's bleeding edge technology costs more, and that's where you're going to focus, because those people who are going to run out and buy 7950Xs with $500, $600 motherboards, they are the ones that have the cash to burn on it. So it makes a lot of sense.
That's a funny thing too. I heard from some contacts I have at Micro Centers. They were saying, and it's somewhat anecdotal, but it's a few Micro Centers, and they're like, our 7950Xs are actually selling almost as well per day as the last gen. It's just no one wants a 7600X,
Right.
and most people don't want anything below the 7950X. It's interesting. Although I will say they did that deal at Micro Center for a weekend where they gave away free RAM with the motherboards, and they said just boom, they couldn't keep anything in stock. It was just gone. Anything that applied to that deal.
Yeah, it just kind of tells you it was a little hard it was just a little too much. Besides, you're moving to a new platform. You got to buy memory. You got to there's all kinds of things. And I think it definitely hurt it. And the weird thing is, of course, Intel is sort of like in a better position with Raptor Lake in a ways, because it's going to slot into the same boards, so it's just kind of this odd reversal where Intel is like, hey, look, we're giving you a new CPU in the same socket, and we got DDR4. You don't want to pay for DDR5. We got DDR4, right? So,
well, and what's interesting is I was told by James Pryor, he said that whole Micro Center deal, and he corroborated what someone else told me at Micro Center, like after it happened, that actually what he was told by higher ups is that they weren't paying for that. It was some deal with AMD and G-Skill. AMD paid for all of those free memory kits, not Micro Center.
Wow.
And James Pryor said, yeah, we did that all the time. If something wasn't selling, we'd find a partner who needed the most help, and we would just do a deal. Because if we do a bunch of price cuts now, that's millions of dollars that we lose. We need to make sure the price cut will even help, right? And that's what they were doing at Micro Center. And I noticed when B650 came out, on Newegg, all Zen processors were 3% off for one day. And I was just like, that, and now it's gone. I'm like, that was definitely AMD going, if we make our processors cost about the same as Raptor Lake and have cheaper boards, will people buy them? And it's just interesting to see these little tests AMD seems to be doing to see how they need to respond, because we're on the cusp. This podcast will come out right before Raptor Lake's about to launch. And I get the feeling that I don't know if it will happen on day one, but I think AMD is going to have an answer to Raptor Lake this month if they need to. And it's clear they can afford to. When I see these little case studies they're doing.
Do you see it as a pricing move? Because I do want to ask you, because it feels like 13900K is, cheaper technically. It will eventually get to the price that it's launched at. But are they, $100 more bucks for a 7950X? What do you think? Is that a problem?
Well, it's not 100 more. It's like $30 more.
Well, 700, right? On paper, right? So.
Yeah, 700 versus I think it's 660 or whatever it's selling for.
I can't remember what the...
Well, so that's the weird thing. The way Intel announces their prices, what they are announcing when they show that is per 1,000 units sold in bulk to Dell. So then Dell and everyone's going to add their 10, 20% markup. And since that's happened, I've had some more retailers confirm to me, like, no, we're making less money per chip sold at the prices we're selling Raptor Lake at than what we're making with Zen 4. So there's move for a price cut, and they would still be making more money on every Zen chip sold. And in fact, Pat Gelsinger does an end of week Q&A with employees, and an employee sent me some of the quotes he said, and he said our margins are too low and we've got to fix this now. So Intel, even at the pricing for Raptor Lake we're seeing, which is higher than I think some people expected, which is to say like $330 for the i5K, 660, 670. I don't actually remember for the i9. That's actually still lower margins. I think what I would expect AMD to do is spank their motherboard partners hard, because from what I understand, it's the motherboard partners. They don't need to be charging more for these motherboards. AMD's not telling them to do it. And they just know they can milk because they're first. And I think what we're going to see is AMD say, hey guys, which I've heard Jensen's actually doing, by the way, with the 4090, which is why you're seeing it sell for MSRP. I think AMD is going to say, get your shit together. We're not going to sell any processors if you don't put these close to where they're supposed to be. And I think AMD is going to allow retailers to sell their processors below MSRP if they want to, which is what happened with Zen 3. AMD did no official price cuts for Zen 3, and yet we just saw everything drift $50 to $100 below MSRP. And I think AMD is just going to say, if you guys want to, you can.
It's just funny because you're gonna. I always feel bad for motherboard vendors because they're always left holding the bag. Like, hey, like SLI connector, Crossfire connector. Oh, who's going to pay for this? The graphics card vendor? That could make sense, right? No, you're going to bundle it in the box with them. And I always feel bad for board vendors because they always, like, everybody makes them include everything. Like, what the hell? Why am I getting these things in the box?
And I do think when it comes to graphics cards, that's happened sometime. I mean, look, EVGA stopped working with Nvidia for this reason. So to the people, and I've seen people in like the comments of some of my videos and podcasts say this, like, fuck these graphics card makers. They're milking us. It's like, in fact, EVGA left Nvidia guys because they weren't making money. So that's actually not true all the time. Sometimes it is, but not all the time. What I do know about B650 and X670 chipsets is they are cheaper to make than the previous gen. So I don't know what AMD is charging them, right? But what I would say is, I think they're making money on these things. When I see a $500 motherboard, there's no way around it. These motherboard makers are. Sometimes I think they're getting squeezed, but I don't know that they are this time, and I think it might be pissing off AMD.
Yeah, no, I mean, the board vendors. I mean, but they do. It's funny because I've been wanting to talk to a board vendors. Like, look, let's just do BOM costs in these boards, because how the hell are we getting up to $600 in these things? Like, look at all these ASICs you got. I mean, like, there's just, and a lot, in their defense, they'll say like, look at all the crap we got to put on this board. You see all these USB controllers, and like this stupid little diode might have gone up in cost by like 100 or 300% because of supply chain issues. And, they do have reasons for it. And then also I think part of it is like, they really do, especially at that $500. They really ladle on the features, right? And they're heavily overbuilt, So there might be, but I would actually like to sit down. It's like, look, let's actually look at the actual parts that go into this, and like the amount of layers, the amount of traces, it all adds up.
Well, and there's certainly inflation. I think that the people that think we should have like $70 B650 motherboards, I'm like, these are so much nicer than the motherboards I got for my like Ivy Bridge system, guys. I'm sorry. Like, let's not pretend.
Don't you remember in the days like the like, it was always like, it was weird. We were in the 2000s. It was always like $230. Like, somehow there was something magical about the $230 motherboard. That was a high-end motherboard, right? I mean, they had some once in a while more expensive, but most of the like, high-end board was $230. Like, that was like, and then now the high-end boards are like, $900. It's crazy, right? But at the same time, you pick up a $230 high-end motherboard from way, way back then and compare it to today's motherboard.
But here's the thing, right? I go to Newegg right now, and I'm seeing the ASRock X670E Pro, and it looks like it comes with a Wi-Fi. It does. It comes with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. It's Extreme, X70 Extreme, all of the features. It's $265 after rebate. I'm not seeing the insanity that bad here. I mean, it's just, it is expensive because it first came out. Now, people would then point to like the 600. I mean, my X570 motherboard was really expensive. So I don't know what people's memories are here, but like they got expensive about then. But when people point to like the $600 and $1,000 motherboards, my answer always is, I have nothing to say. I think those are just for people who have too much money. Like, I'm not going to I don't know who's buying the $600 motherboards, and I doubt they make a lot of them. I'd be fascinated if a motherboard manufacturer said, we actually sell a lot of $1,000 motherboards. I don't even think those are worth talking about. Guys, that's the milking edition. That's for like a professional overclocker. I don't think you need to show me a $1,500 motherboard like it proves any point. I don't know. What do I think about that? Nothing. What do I think about the $3,000 Kingpin NVIDIA graphics cards? Nothing. I think nothing. No one's going to buy that.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people, especially when you're looking at the entire audience, and the one thing that has really shifted from when I started is it's gotten so much larger. PC gaming, PCs are just so huge now, and they're very mainstream. It's really hard to lose sight of the fact that a lot of people just buy stuff only because it's cooler. Like, how many people go out and buy a 900 horsepower Challenger, right? Like, you bought that because it's got 900 horsepower that you will never use, but because you want it to be cool, and that's, I think those people are real, and hey, if you got the money for it, more power to you. But I think people really do need to keep in mind that there are people with a lot more money than
yes, and there always will be.
And I'm not going to tell them how to, like, if they're spending their money on something, it's their money. But I also, yeah, is it for me? Am I going to buy $1,000 motherboard? But a lot of those boards are built for those people. Like, yeah, if you're a professional overclocker, yeah. Is this person who's buying a professional overclocker? No. But it's just like, hey, this is the same board the professional overclockers buy. I want this, right? That's a real thing out there. There are a lot of people in this world that have a ton of money.
Going back on subject to just like Intel stuff, how are you feeling about Raptor Lake? Like, how do you think it's going to do? Because it's funny, like, just to kind of set the stage, everyone complained about AM5 motherboard pricing, but we're seeing sales already start to happen. And now that Raptor Lake's about to launch, Z790 doesn't look much cheaper than X670. In fact, it looks like it is the same price, guys. And it seems like we'll see what happens. I think either way, it's going to almost depend on the website you go to, because these processors are so close in performance. But there's stuff coming out now that, like, the 7700X beats all of Raptor Lake at gaming besides the i9 potentially, if not ties everything below the i9, meaning that really when Intel wins gaming, it's with the i9, and everything else has to be clocked lower because of yields, because it's a monolithic design, a thing AMD has an advantage at. So as much as Intel's giving you more threads per tier for sure now, it does seem like they might not have a gaming advantage. This almost looks like a reverse of what we're used to seeing with AMD versus Intel. But I don't know, what I'm rambling. Like, what do you expect out of Raptor? Like, how do you expect it to do, and what are you looking for in these reviews?
I got to be careful because I'm mid-review cycle.
Sure.
I can't talk about any of this stuff, but I think the public numbers look good. Again, out of Israel, they said, 15% single-threaded performance and 41%
up to 15, I think.
Up to 15, and in spec. It looks like they're going to have an advantage in core count, obviously. For people who get, like, for me, again, I'm an old-time reviewer. The amount of games you used to run as a CPU reviewer was like very little, because who cared, right? And part of that was because it was like Intel versus Intel versus Intel, so that got really kind of boring. I remember a Tom's Hardware review for Haswell where they said the title of the review was Haswell's 10% faster, enthusiasts yawn. Yeah, no, I mean, what was it was one of those things where it was like they had no competition, right? So it was like themselves against themselves. It was really, again, that's why part of the reasons why that department didn't get like all kinds of money and pressure to keep improving themselves. But as far as like, I think for the gaming thing, like, people get like really caught up. For me, maybe it's just because of my perspective. I think people get a little too torqued up in I need this CPU for this gaming. Like, I always think put all your money toward the biggest, fattest GPU you can afford, right? If you're really looking at Ryzen 9 versus Core i9, 12th gen, whatever, I mean, is it really worth getting that worked up over it? If you can take the extra money and pour it toward, the next bin up GPU, I think it's always better than getting all into parsing out these little charts for small percentage differences. It's like, these CPUs are so damn fast. You really just need to get the most expensive, fastest graphics card you can afford. I would love to see with 4090. I don't have a 4090, but I kind of wonder if that's going to change the math a little bit. But it does. I think it could. It doesn't it feel like we're just in like this bizarre purgatory right now, where like all reviewers wish they had the 4090 to review Zen 4, but now they're also not doing it quite yet, because why redo all your benchmarks until you're doing the comparison to Raptor Lake? And I think we're about to be out of that purgatory because Raptor Lake's about to launch. But I do feel like it might be another 2 weeks before we really know which one's better at what, because we needed the 4090 to test them. I agree with you, because I think and this has come up on our podcast too. People are like, why aren't you using the absolute latest thing for everything? And like, they don't. And I will say this, people they want to just jump down the throat of every single reviewer because they go like, you
Oh,
didn't
I'm
run it the
aware.
way I want you to run it. You need to run it this way, otherwise you're on the take, or you're just stupid, or what's wrong with you? Why didn't you like? They don't understand the amount of work it takes to do just one review, and then you've got this immense database of numbers. It's really, really hairy to manage, and a lot of people, they did reviews with older CPUs because you can't just start all over again. You just don't do that on a dime, and people need to understand it. We'll finally be there where people will have 4090s, but then it'll be like, now everybody has to get 4090s. Now, then they're going to be like, well, do I need 13 gen? Should I standardize in 13 gen? Should I use 7000?
And there's going to be the argument that maybe you should be waiting for RDNA 3 because we know Nvidia's scheduler isn't as good as AMD's. AMD seems to be a little higher at high refresh rate with RDNA. So then there's a chance we'll see the 4090 not change things too much all the time. It's just now you can benchmark the CPUs in 4K instead of 1080p. And then RDNA 3 comes, and that RDNA 3 with smart access memory may just change the whole equation. We have no idea. It might just make Zen 4 fly.
It might. And you know what's kind of interesting too is, so when I did Ryzen 7000, I looked at the high end and I got some numbers from our sister brother website in Germany, PCWorld, and he did some his testing. So I got his numbers, I got my numbers. And some of he had more of a delta between some of the parts than I did. We don't use the same game. So he has his set that he likes to use. I have my set. And I was like, interesting. There's more of a spread here. I mean, not huge, not enough to like, oh my God, change my world kind of thing. But I was kind of wondering, like, if this was AMD plus AMD, because he used 6950 XT, I use 3090s. And I was like, I wonder if is that Sam? Is it just simply AMD plus AMD? Then I started to also think like, maybe it's just because honestly, AMD is generally done pretty well at rasterized gaming. Like, honestly, better than probably 3090 would, right? So I was like, especially at 1080p. So I was like, I wonder if it's just because a lot of the games that people are using, I mean, they're not using all the advanced features. They're not cranking on, ray tracing and all the other stuff. A lot of times, like, rasterized gaming is probably what's going to skew most of the game benchmarks. I kind of am wondering if that's an issue. So not to take it off on a tangent, but.
Well, so yeah, it sounds like you don't want to get too much into what you predict in exact percentages between Raptor Lake and Zen 4 because you're reviewing it, right? But like, let me ask. I mean, can I ask you though, like, how you think it will? Let's just put it this way: it seems like the i5 is going to cost 10%, maybe after discounts, 20% more than the R5s. The i7s, how do I put it? Actually, the i7s cost between the R7 and the entry, like 12 core R9, but AMD's probably going to beat them at gaming. Intel's probably going to win in multi-threading, except maybe against the 7900X. We'll see. And it's funny, the 7950X versus the i9-13900K, AMD costs more, but it's like, do they $30-$40 more? Is that much more when these processors are $700? And it seems like they're going to basically tie it gaming and multi-threading. AMD has the longevity platform. Intel doesn't. Intel has cheaper options, but in the mid-range and high-end, their motherboards are actually pretty similarly priced. How do you think Raptor Lake stacks up competitively? Is it just like basically a tie where they both have advantages, but honestly, they're both close? Or do you think one has an advantage overall?
So I'm going to answer that again using publicly released information. I would say at the high end, it's probably going to be that dogfight that people expect, like win some, lose some. I mean, honestly, you got to figure because 7,000 was, 40% faster than 5950, and then, significant increase
in multi-threading,
in multi-threading, significant increase in, lightly threaded, single-threaded tasks. And Intel has said like, hey, by the way, Raptor Lake's going to be 15% and 41%. So you can sort of see it's probably like at the high end where they are just pushing the sockets to the absolute limits. I mean, which we're seeing everywhere. It probably is going to be a dogfight based on the publicly released numbers. I think the problem for AMD is really for Ryzen 5, and mid range, because Intel is just simply giving you more cores, and that's, I think, a problem. Like for me, when I looked at like 5600 versus 12600K, 12600K was like destruction derby.
Yeah, I have one. Yeah,
it was like, why would you? Yeah, I mean, honestly, again, if you're just a gamer, then who cares? Honestly, you could be running like an i3. It doesn't matter. But I sort of think like, for everybody who does care about performance, that advantage that Core i5 12600K had over Ryzen 5 was just like, it was just brutal. It was just brutal, right? Because it was like, if you care about multi-threaded performance or multitasking or all these things and lightly threaded performance, you're going to want Intel, right? It was a clear, generally recommend CPU over Ryzen. I'm not so sure that math is going to change here either, because AMD itself, even when they were doing the presentations in Austin, they're like, oh yeah, we should do really well with gaming with Ryzen 5. What about multi-threaded performance? Yeah, we might give up. They pretty much admitted, like, 14 cores versus 6s.
It sounds like Intel during Coffee Lake, right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, it's like, it was just, you can clearly see kind of where that's coming from. I don't think it's going to change, because it's really funny because Intel is just giving, yes, they increased the price of the Core i5 Raptor Lake, but you're still you're still apparently getting way more than AMD is giving you.
It's going to be hard for me to argue to get any Raptor Lake besides that i5 when it's giving you 6 big and 8 little cores. I can't imagine anyone needing more than, 20 threads.
Yeah, no, I'm with you too, and that's again the reasons like why, for what I do, honestly, even have for what even like Core i5 is probably overkill for most people. But the people buy Core i7 and Core i9 and Ryzen 9 and Ryzen 7 because you like to look cool. It's like, I got to get better. I got to get a better thing, and 7's more than 5. So
I'm curious where you think the calculus would change, though, because from and I've been trying to sound the alarm for months about, because everyone keeps saying the i5 is going to destroy the R5, and I'm like, as far as I can tell, though, that 6-core 7600X is going to win gaming against that i5. Like it seems like it's going to. So if it was $250 and then the i5 was almost $100 more, then does the 7600X get easily recommended for you? Because the funny thing is the problem this generation is, I feel like Zen 3 and especially Alder Lake hit a level of performance that kind of made this whole conversation stupid for most people. It's like, now you need to try to hit 300. I think Gamers Nexus made fun of it, like AMD loses Rainbow Six Siege with an embarrassing 600 frames per second.
Right.
Like that type of stuff. Like, if the R5 7600X is $250 and it wins in gaming, and then the 7700X became the same price as the i5, so basically almost time multi-threading but winning gaming, do you then recommend AMD? Because I think AMD is going to respond. So I'm trying to think of like where the calculus would change in your opinion.
Well, it has to be with price cuts, though, right? I mean, that's kind of, it feels like the only way they can sort of move. I mean, what is 7600? What is the actual street price in those these days?
It's $300, but I'm told it has much higher margins for the retailers themselves than the i5 is going to. Where the i5, they're making like $10 per one sold, whereas the 7600X, they're making much more than that. So they could go down, I think, that much.
Right, but I mean, where does that come from, though? Does the retailer want to take less money, or does AMD say, hey, you need to cut the price of these? I don't know how the sort of like business decisions work out at a retailer. I generally think they like to sell.
No, I know.
Need Diet Coke for more money, so.
But if they did, though, is that where you think it would change, or do you think it would have to be cheaper than like $250? Like, again, the 7700X becomes $350, the 7600X becomes $250. Does that basically just balance it out? Is $50 really all that was required, and maybe cheaper motherboards?
Yeah, I think it's going to take the cheaper motherboards. I mean, but the other thing that is, again, that weird advantage for Intel is like, hey, you could do DDR4, which, DDR5 has really, really come down in price, but you still have you could still do a DDR4 build with Intel. Maybe you have existing memory you're moving over, so there's that advantage. I think everybody needs to, and this is the problem with the internet, is everybody thinks some dude or dudette on Reddit telling you this is the absolute right answer for everything is wrong. It comes down to what is right for that person.
Well, that's
So-
the funny thing is, it's like if we remove $50, all of a sudden it's not a big deal, and it's like it's not that different, really.
Yeah, I mean,
But
does
that's
it really
competition,
help? It is competition, but it feels like they have to respond with price cuts. Does it make it more competitive? I don't know. It's hard to tell because you got to do like the full build, spec it out. I think though, for the average person, the average consumer that is price conscious, they still want decent performance. Who cares? That's my answer. Just buy I think that's one of the problems that people get a little too worked up over is like, yeah, this one's faster. Are you doing 3D renders? No, you're not. Are you doing anything that's using all the cores? No, you're not. Then why care, right? People get a little, but this whole industry is, we hate to admit it, but we're basically like the sneaker industry, right? Like, oh yeah, I need these Jordans. Like, really $300 for these stupid pair of sneakers? It's not going to make any difference, right? But that's, people get caught up in that. As a practical level, most people don't need anything near what these processors can offer. So I think I wouldn't get too worked up over it. But yeah, honestly, cutting 50 can help, but you do still have DDR4 as being an issue. The boards can come down in price. That can help as well.
But if you want to use DDR4, shouldn't you be getting the 5800X3D anyways? Which blows everything out of the water and uses DDR4 and has cheaper motherboards than Alder Lake. Like, if you care about price, like, why are we even talking about these two things? Do you think,
well, yeah, here's the other question I have is, do you think the X3D can come down in pricing anymore? I just had this kind of like weird thought the other day. Like, we all love the X3D, awesome part. But is that really the answer? Because can you really get the X3D? Can you really cut that thing to like $300? Or are they like giving away money?
The thing is, I just don't know how much money the packaging adds. It really doesn't add much cost in silicon. The Vcache in materials is not expensive. And we're talking about 7 nanometer and 12 nanometer for the IO die silicon instead of 6 and 5 nanometer. And from what I hear, actually Zen 4 is cheaper to make than Raptor Lake. So if Zen 4 is cheaper to make than Raptor Lake, the 5800X 3D should cost less to make than the 7700X, I would think. So I don't see why they couldn't at least go down to 350. The question is how many of those they even want to make when they're using the same dies for Milan X for server. But they are transitioning to Genoa now. So might they free up that capacity? Yes. The only thing I can say is it's plausible they could get it below 350, but I think it's more of an issue of if they want to make that many when they can make server chips. And then there's the question of, with which maybe we'll get to this, Fishhawk Falls coming out, which I leaked. It's actually does seem to be coming out by Q1. So we're going to have these monolithic 24-core, 34-core chips from Intel. It doesn't sound like Zen 4 Threadripper is going to be ready until late next year at the earliest. If that's true, maybe AMD wants to launch Zen 3D Threadripper chips to compete with Fishhawk Falls, right? Like, so would you rather sell a $5,000 64 core or 10? Yeah, it seems like you're making more money on that $5,000 one than trying to sell like 10 of those 5800X 3Ds, or 20 of those actually, depending on the price it goes down to. So I think it's more of a question of how much supply they have than it is even cost.
Right. But it was still, the cool experiment partnership with TSMC to even make. So how many do they ever, do they get? Right. So I just kind of wonder how low in price they're willing to go, because we don't really know what TSMC charge them. So I just kind of wonder if that is a competitive, if it really can be competitively priced. It's going to be awesome for what it is, but it's, you're still getting last generation. So, and as much as it does help in a lot of games, not every game gives you that performance bump, right? And then you're still also dealing with a chip that is below a 5800X in clocks. So up against a 7700X, a lot of lightly threaded tasks, it honestly,
I think it should cost less, and that's the thing though. So I guess that's my answer. If AMD could get the 5800X 3D to $300, it's game over. That's all I'm recommending to budget builds. If it stays above the price of the i5, I don't really care if it beats the i5 on average by 5%. The i5 doubles its multi-threading performance, so I'd probably recommend the i5 over that because I'm just going to say you're not going to notice the difference in gaming anyways. Frankly, you probably wouldn't notice the difference with an Alder Lake i3 for half of the people. So
Yeah, let me bounce this question off you. Is it a problem? People love the fact that AM4 was just an amazing socket that gave everybody so much. Do you think it's actually a strategy AMD should really pursue down the road? Because we saw a lot of people like, you know what? I'm not going to buy your new CPU. I'm going to buy one of the older ones on the special closeout because hell, I'm getting a 5800X for nothing or a 5900. It really, a lot of people, it feels like, you know what? I'm just going to do an in-socket upgrade, not going to buy your new thing. And it just comes at the worst possible time for AMD because we know the market is obviously starting to, we're going back into the other direction now, all the world events and all that stuff. But it feels like this, like if I were AMD, like one of the bean counters, it's like, great. You gave everybody this wonderful upgrade path and they slap us in the face with it at the very worst time, right? You should be selling more 7,000 parts, but they're all buying your older parts on closeout pricing. Like, why should we do this? Whereas, it's really funny if you think about it, like if you had built a KB Lake Intel box and like now you're going to do a new box, like do I do 12th gen, 13th gen, new board, start over, right? For AMD, that person's like, oh, I'll just buy the new CPU and drop it in. You basically lose a sale on your new things that give you more margin, and your older thing they're buying on the closeout thing. So that I kind of wonder, like, you kind of wonder that's going to leave a scar at AMD. It's like, oh yeah, we really screwed ourselves by giving people this option. It's part of Intel's magic. The business people love it is they can manage these supply chains where, hey, suddenly you can no longer buy the old things, like they're all gone, right? 8th gen, oh. You go look at the prices of an 8th gen part, they are through the roof. And I just kind of wonder if like this is kind of the thing that just will make AMD go like, yeah, maybe we'll just make you buy a new motherboard every 2 cycles, because this sucks.
I think it is a good investment because when I talk to people, retailers, I have some pretty good friends now that like own some multiple storefronts, like, and they're like, Alder Lake sold terribly compared to what Intel expected. And that's the reason everything below the i5K is rebrands for now. I think eventually they might launch the Raptor Lake versions of the non-K i5s. But for now, they're just rebranding Alder Lake because they got to get rid of this crap. Like they've got too much of it. They made too much of it. I honestly think Intel thought to themselves, once we beat AMD by even 5%, everyone's going to switch back to daddy Intel. And then they didn't. And I think Intel's scared. And the reason they didn't is retailers said everyone could just switch to discount Zen 3 and the 5800X3D, and they didn't need a new motherboard. So making it so you have a motherboard that lasts a long time doesn't win you any favor with motherboard manufacturers for sure. And short term, it's a bad business decision, but I would say it's like a trust fund or buying bonds. It's like, I know these bonds are a waste of money now, but they will mature. And once they mature, you're going to have more money. And this allowed them to just murk Alder Lake. Then AMD didn't lose market share to Alder Lake. It's crazy. I only basically recommended Alder Lake to new systems. Having said that, if it wasn't a new system, I was like, 5800X3D is just as good at gaming. I don't know why you care. And I think that's what AMD should be thinking about right now. The concern I have is they're not acting like they do. I think they will have a long-term support for AM5, at least to Zen 6 or at least Zen 5 Plus or whatever happens then. There'll be at least 3 gens. Zen 4, Zen 5, and something else. I'm sure of that. Whether it's called Zen 5 Plus or Zen 6, I don't know. But at the same time, if that's what they really were focusing on, this would be the time to make it cheaper than ever. Like, if you, like, this Raptor Lake isn't out yet. And this is a motherboard platform where people will keep it for 5 years. Make them want to upgrade so that you keep them for another 5 years. And it just doesn't seem like AMD was aggressive enough with that. What I don't know is if that's because this is just the worst time to launch a high-end product in gaming history, and they didn't think they need to be cheaper. I think we're going to find out within a month. Do they do a bunch of discounts and push the advantage to get people to stay on AMD for the next 5 years? If the answer is no, And they're almost acting like they don't care, even if they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things like they just may have to, maybe they can't cut the pricing because, these are ultimately all businesses. They want to make more money. So,
or there's no point, right? Like they need to supply Genoa to customers. They use the same chiplets. Maybe they know we could afford to make it, 600, 450 and 300 and 250 for all these models if we wanted to. But then it would instantly sell out. And then we'd have to make the hard decision. Do we want to make, a Genoa processor is going to sell for like, I don't know, 10 grand, right? For 96 cores. And so you have 12 CCDs. And if I divide like $10,000 by 12, each CCD is going for $800. That's more than an entire 7950X that's wasting two of those. So if you're AMD, maybe you're like, it's just a shitty market. We're going to make it priced just where it needs to be competitive. But if we go any lower, we can't make enough of these anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's, server, again, that's where you do print the money on server. So.
No, yeah. But let me ask you this then moving forward to just more broad conversations. Like a couple years ago, I did videos where I was like, I think Alder Lake and XE, then it was called XE, now we just call it ARC. Those are going to be the products to watch. If those are both home runs, Intel's back, baby. If one of them is good, that means Intel's not out yet. And if both of them suck, I'm worried about Intel's future. Alder Lake was good, but it didn't set the world on fire, it turns out. And Alchemist, I don't think we can say it's been great. Like, do you think Intel's out of the woods in your mind in terms of like their trajectory, how they look at as competitive to AMD? I mean, Sapphire Rapids was meant to compete with Milan. It's going to compete with Genoa and Genoa X. And Raptor Lake seems like it's a tie with Zen 4. Do you think Intel's back? And if not, like when do you think we're going to see it? Is it going to be Meteor Lake? Is it going to be Arrow Lake? Granite Rapids, Diamond Rapids, like all of these random code names?
I think they have to demonstrate that they can hit their mark. Again, back in the day, Intel always hit every single mark on schedule. And of course, that has not been the way it's been for quite a while now. So they really have to prove to everybody that they can hit their mark. I think, honestly, in performance, given they're clearly still a bit behind, TSMC and where they're at, they're doing pretty good. For consumers, they are doing, I think, really well because they're still giving you a lot. But as far as like, do I think Intel is out of the woods as far as like their ability to hit their roadmaps? I'd say I'd have to wait. The one thing though I think people need to remember is they are almost essentially a United States DoD. They're basically,
yes, I know. People remind me that it's true.
They are essentially as important to technology in the United States as people who make F-35s. So I don't think like anybody who thinks Intel is going to vanish and go away. That's just simply ridiculous.
We're so far away from making that argument.
It's never, and I people always kind of say that and they want to say it, but it's just so ridiculous because people don't realize the scale and resources that Intel has, and the fact that Uncle Sam is now cutting them checks to do this fab, and people really want to see them get these fabs off the ground, and they could honestly be making Apple M4s down the road. They could be making Zen down the road. Who knows, right? Their fab services are like basically an oil field for the United States. So I think no. As far as performance, going great. As far as like, are they really going to be able to execute? I don't know. Like, who would I put my money on like Meteor Lake coming out on time? Like, no, not me. I wouldn't put my money
on time. If it comes out late next year, I'd say it's not on time. They would argue it is, but
Well, and did they say first half or second half? I don't know what the official roadmap is, but
that's the funny thing is I tend to remember what AMD says and I don't remember what Intel says. I honestly just talk to my sources. I don't really care what Intel says publicly because they're right less often than they're wrong with what they say publicly. So I'd be an idiot to follow anything they say publicly, frankly.
Yeah. I just kind of I for some reason I remember being first half for.
That's when it was supposed to be. But I'm curious what their latest public statement is. It was supposed to come out beginning of early 2024. But now on their roadmap, they say Meteor Lake and Arrow Lake 2023 to 2024. Whatever that means, it's supposed to be early 2023. So it seems like they're leaving quite a bit of vagueness there.
Yeah.
And so I at least what I hear is it's late 2023. So almost a Strix competitor, that more so than a Phoenix competitor. And almost a Zen 5 competitor as well. Certainly a Zen 4 with Vcache competitor, not a Zen 4 competitor.
Yeah, but that's again like that. That's how far Intel has fallen, though. Right? That kind of like, they never missed before, and now it's like, yeah, call me when you got something that's ready, because it's just been, it hasn't been great, and that's why, like for me, I actually think Alder Lake was fantastic because. There are a lot of dogs in there, and then like rebrands of the same dog. And to me, that's why 12th gen was so much better, because it was like, oh, this is you now actually competing. So that is it. It's a lean sign, but it leans more positive. But again, I'm not putting my money on it till we see the things, right? That's a problem for them.
Well, let me ask you this too. Again, I'm not suggesting they're going to go out of business anytime soon, but it's kind of like when I talk about what I mean by like high-end discrete ARC being effectively canceled. When I talk about things changing at Intel, no, they're not going to go out of business. But you said, well, I mean, they're a DoD funded, they're like almost like an oil well for the U.S. tech sector. Okay, but like if they just become a TSMC competitor, is that really the Intel we remember? Like, is it really the same company at that point? Like, if GM was making the engines for Ford cars but not making cars, is that really, like, I think that's close enough to things have changed, even no one's saying they're going to completely go out of business.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, believe me, there are people on the internet who say that.
Never
actively.
No one reasonable is saying.
No one reasonable would say that. And I agree with you. And frankly, like I kind of feel like eventually they'll have to take the Intel name out of the Foundry services, or because it feels like it'll just be a Foundry service that everybody uses.
Well, and I can't go into too much detail, but I heard a crazy rumor from one of my best sources who knows a lot of people, who said that AMD is playing around with how they could try to get into fabs again. So I will say that, and I don't think they're going to anytime soon. This isn't Tom saying AMD is going to make their own fabs, guys. But I am saying, when you think about the checks the U.S. government's cutting, the U.S. government just wants the best chips to be competitive. Why would they not cut checks to TSMC? Why would they not just spitballing here, cut checks to a joint venture between AMD and TSMC? They just want the best chips to compete with China.
Right.
They don't care if it says Intel. That's just the easiest thing to keep funding right now.
No, I think also they want it built here, and they also want, to have oversight of it, which is the reason why you build it here, right? So, could a joint AMD TSMC in theory work? Would that satisfy the U.S. government? Hopefully. Yeah, I guess I could see it. It just feels like
we're getting into speculation territory here, though.
Pure spec. Yeah, and the thing to me is like, that's just like a heavy ass lift. It feels like, but I mean, I guess if you're basically, AMD TSMC, that's kind of different, but maybe. I mean, I could see it, right? I mean, it's just so funny. I think it would be like,
right, the only way you could think of it working is I think it would be a fab owned by AMD, an American company, so the U.S. government could have oversight, but then it would have a joint technology venture with TSMC, similar to what Samsung had with Global Foundries or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And then TSMC is like, yeah, we want the money.
It just feels like any development, though, is like, that is like, we're like a decade away from everything.
Yeah, it's not. Let's be clear about that too. That would be if Intel wasn't going on the right track and the government was like, we got to do something, and that'd be a decade from now. We're not talking about next year. Which, let me then pivot back to like things that are happening in the short term. So Tatsuya Shiba writes in, and he says, with the upcoming leaked layoffs for Intel, do you think they'll have the right talent to continue with their ongoing projects? And I'm bringing up that report from Bloomberg, and I talked to, and Pat in his Q&A actually with employees on Friday said that the layoffs are coming. So like that's pretty much confirmed now that it's going to be a pretty wide ranging thing. Like,
Right.
how do you feel about how much that could affect their competitiveness? I mean, I've got my own thoughts, but what do you think?
I would expect them to be smart about, the layoffs. They've had them. They've had, significant ones in the past too. This one looks like it'll also be fairly significant, but it's clear to me that Pat wants to be, we want to be here. We're not, again, he's not going to take the misadventures previous execs have there, and they understand, like, we can't, like, oh, let's gut the CPU division now. No, like that. I don't expect that to happen. So no, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference as far as that. I hope, again, we all say this, but we've also all worked at companies like, what? Why did this makes zero sense. Like, we've all been there. I just don't think, I don't think
Pat's dumb though, right? Well, yeah. Or I don't think he's the type of person that would do something like that.
It's kind of funny. Don't you think it's really interesting now that we have gone, like, if I say Jensen, everybody knows who Jensen is. If I say Lisa, everybody knows who Lisa is. Before Pat, do you even remember how to pronounce his name? It was like, or the person before him, it's just like, we are like,
that's a fair point. Like, no one really paid any attention to those CPU CEOs. The funny thing is, though, is how much of that is a sign of the times, where we have these weird, like, Elon Musk-ish, Tim, like cults of personality around anyone who runs a company, and how much of that is they're more important. I would say it's because these people are more important. But and
they're making the moves that I think everybody, hey, you know what? People can criticize them all they want. It feels like, Pat Gelsinger is making moves that people, a lot of ex-Intel people I talked to were like, oh, it was awesome to get Pat back. But it was just like, people are happy with it out externally too, right? I mean, because Brian Krasanich there was a lot of dislike for him, and drones and all that stuff came under him, and I just kind of like, it's very interesting that they have this, like, Pat. When you say Pat,
you're right, though. This is the first time, like, Intel CEOs have been looked at in a similar way to, like, Jensen. So I don't think that would mean a bad thing, right?
Yeah, So I just think it's just so funny. Like, oh, now they have they've had other CEOs that people have liked as well. But I just kind of think, like, oh, when you say Pat, Jensen and Lisa, who all three are now, right? So, or like Tim Cook, who.
Yeah, or me and Dan jokingly call him Tim Apple because the president called him that in a meeting. We think it's hilarious, but a former president. But yeah, so I guess all I would say to actually answer Tetsuya's question is they're not going to cancel the team lead for Diamond Rapids or like guys unless he clearly wasn't doing a good job. Like, they're going to gut the divisions that have failed, and the ones that they can't support anymore. And I don't think any of those are the core products that we're looking forward to buying from, like, Fishhawk Falls or, Meteor Lake and Arrow Lake. But to kind of start pivoting forward, one thing that I want to say is, like, I think we just need to see, like, I think it's interesting to put things into perspective of where Intel is now relative to, like, Nvidia versus AMD. Because when we talk about, like, what you need, it's like you want to see Intel consistently compete with AMD several gens in a row on the dates they said they would, launching products when they said they would. And then we'll start believing everything is probably going to happen like they say it will in the future. But I think people look at Alder Lake and they're like, oh, well, Intel's back. And I go, guys, I don't think Alder Lake tying AMD at some things, winning at others, and losing at still a couple of things is the same as, like, what NVIDIA's managed to do to Radeon. It doesn't matter. In the past decade, NVIDIA always competes. It does not matter what they launch, what advantages AMD has. Maybe RDNA 2 is a little more efficient than Ampere. Although I can make the argument Ampere isn't as inefficient as people think, although it's certainly not as efficient as they said it was in the slides. But, like, well, Ampere has better ray tracing. Ampere had the products. There's nothing AMD launches that NVIDIA can't launch something next to and make a good argument for it. I'd say I don't think we've seen Intel do stuff like that for a while, though, where it's like, no, we know what they launch is going to at least tie AMD.
Yeah, no, I agree with you because, when I think back to the days of Intel dominance, it was dominance, right? They were just like blow everybody out of the water and you couldn't touch them. And honestly, what company does that right now where they blow everybody to the water and you can't touch them? It's Nvidia. Everybody, the internet loves to hate Nvidia, but you got to respect that they don't screw around. They don't get out of focus. They don't whatever, they execute and they do it well and they are hyper competitive. So yeah, no, I mean, definitely there. I mean, like, I can't think
I think we need to see that from Intel before we start talking about a real resurgence. We need to see like 3 products in a row where it's just like, boom, no, we have an answer to Zen 5 right here, right now, not a year late.
I see, but the thing is, the reason why I would say like the headline of my review of the 12th gen for Alder Lake was like Intel is back, and the reason is like, yeah, they're back because like they had set the bar so low before that. If you think about it, it was just like they're just getting wiped out by Zen 2, Zen 3s, and it's just like it was just ugly, and the fact that they're at least in the conversation, and then honestly giving you more down at the lower, those i5s were just giving you more, than AMD. It was like, that is like, you could honestly consider, you would like most people like, yeah, you could buy Intel and feel better about it. And I was like, that had been gone for years, right? I mean, so to me, that had made them better. And, I also try to view everything from a consumer's point of view. A consumer's they're going to buy one product. They're not going to think about it. They're not really like the chip nerds that, we're talking about this process, that, or bum. To me, it's just like consumer just wants to know, am I buying something and it's good? And that to me is, but the fact that they had lowered the bar so much that again, yeah, there were definitely arguments for why Zen 3 was better on, multi-core loads. I made them myself, but, they had an advantage on lightly threaded and they were kind of like, pretty close to 5950X. That was a win for Intel. I mean, is it the win they had like where before they were just like Core 2 were like, oh yeah, we're 40% faster than you, everything, right? But it's still.
But that's why I say Intel's got to execute 3 gens in a row where they do the same thing Alder Lake did before we can say they're back. And here's why. I made this analogy in a video like a few months ago, and I think you'll definitely be someone who can appreciate it. You know what the name of Anantech's Alder Lake review was? I think it was also "We're back." I mean, Intel's back. Do you know what it was? You know what other CPU got that title on Anantech?
It was probably the Zen 1.
Phenom 2.
Oh,
was
my
AMD
God.
back when Phenom 2 launched? No, that was right before Bulldozer, actually. That's my only argument is I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. It's just, it was shocking. I found a really interesting analogy where I kept going back to website after website, and almost every Phenom 2 review was AMD's back finally, and then Bulldozer launched. So that's why I say you can't just be back once.
Yeah, no. So again, I think we're going to see what we get out of 13th gen. And if Meteor Lake is, got at least close or has an advantage over competing AMD parts, and you could say, yeah, they hit 3, right? I mean, but again, and I now remember his name. It's just what Mark Papermaster said in his you know what? AMD's, CTO Mark Papermaster is like, they can't run away and process anymore. So we'll see, right? We'll see what happens. But there's, Meteor Lake has got some really, really advanced packaging stuff going on there. So maybe, but who knows? Again, I no longer give Intel the benefit of the doubt that I did 10 years ago. And I think that's fine, because they have to prove that they can do it. But at least they're in the ball game. Like, could you imagine if Alder Lake had come out and was like, oh, like people would have been like, oh my God.
That's why, that's what I said. If Alder Lake and Arc fail, I have no more faith. But Alder Lake was good.
Yeah, right? Alder Lake was good. Arc is, of course, still a work in progress, it looks like.
But it's not the only card that's kind of a work in progress. I turned on the green lights. I want to get into this here. We have a few questions about it because it is recent news. What do you think about the RTX 4080 12GB being unlaunched, which I thought about it. I think the unlaunched name is so they can't quite admit to themselves they're canceling it. And also they're leaving room to launch it in the future if they ever really wanted to. But what do you think about the 4080 12GB situation?
It was obviously very confusing when they originally launched, because 4080 and 4080, like they're both 12 and 16 gig version. It was bizarre, even though there was precedent, right? Because you had 3080 10 gig, or what was it, 12 gig, and then you had like a 3080 original 10 gig version, and they were actually different, slightly different too, right, in the dies. But I think launching them both at the same time was really kind of like what that, and the prices. Obviously, people got really pissed off. I am the kind of person, though, that when you are a company and you clearly have stepped on it and people are angry, and you come out and say, whoa, okay, we're sorry, we're not even going to do that or whatever. Like Apple, like, hey, these butterfly keyboards were terrible, absolutely dismal failures. They kept doing it. And finally they said, okay, no more butterfly keyboard. That was a failure. I'm like, hey, that is like, I'm so glad you've realized you've made a mistake and you're doing it right. There's a lot of people I've talked to that have really jumped on my head because like, oh, I wouldn't give them credit for anything. They shouldn't, you should, like, they still want to be angry about it. So I do think it is a good thing they are going, yeah, we've heard you. Of course, that's their public messaging. I want to hear your opinion on this because, like, I think the public messaging is like, we've heard your anger. We're going to unlaunch this. Yeah, you're right. Could come out again later, or could be rebranded 4070. We don't know. But I also wonder if it's just like all the partners said, look, we didn't anticipate how much 4090, the 4000 series would just simply crush our 3000 sales. As ain't nobody buying these 3080s, right? For $700, $800.
I mean, I think it's a combination of a whole bunch of things. I think Nvidia didn't hear gamers crying. I think they finally showed off that Plague's Tale F1 benchmarks that actually showed the performance difference. And in a Plague's Tale, I believe the 4090 was 2.5 times stronger than the 4080 12 gigabyte. And I think what Nvidia heard is no wallets opening on. And then they were like, oh, no one might buy, like literally no one will buy this. Like, who is buying a $900 3080? Because that's what it is. It's a $900 3080. And that's unprecedented, a performance difference between the top card and what they're calling an 80. So I think they realized truly that this was going to get rock bottom reviews. Like, having said that, the overstock of Ampere situation is very real. I've been covering this pretty extensively. Like, I continue to hear that they're worried the Ampere overstock situation could affect how they price Blackwell graphics cards. Like, that they have truly a year's worth of Ampere. I know some people are arguing. I'm told they have warehouses of a year's worth of new Ampere cards still not sold, and now used cards are hitting the market from miners. And I think that they realized they were going to get god-awful reviews, which I can get into what they were thinking with that card. But I've talked about it a lot recently. And then they said, you know what? This thing's going to do so bad in reviews, and all it's going to do at best is compete with the Ampere cards we're trying to sell. There's two good reasons for us to cancel this. And so I think that's what they did.
Yeah, so like for me, we've seen official reviews on 4090 yet. We haven't seen them on the other cards. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's going to be a 3080 until I see the numbers. I'm very.
But Nvidia just put out benchmarks. Its own numbers said that.
Yeah, but I guess I'd want to see the full reviews because Nvidia likes to present things in a way that's always favorable to themselves. I don't know if. But again, it's like I don't know if it's necessarily the reviews or the internet won because we told them not to launch it and they're not launching it, or it's just like I just feel like they don't really have to worry about 3080s if all the 3080s were gone, but they're not gone, right? They're just not going, and they're not going to go because like, oh, I want to wait for the next. I just kind of wonder if it really was that 40 series, the 4090 really kind of like, oh damn, right? That thing really kind of like set people back, like, oh, this thing is like, it's a real deal. I kind of wonder if that after I saw those numbers, it's like, if you're going to try to sell me a 3080 for $700, I'm like, no way. I'm like, you need to cut that baby down to $450, $500 before it. Cause like, well, why would I just don't see it, I guess. I don't know. Cause I don't talk to a lot of people about all this other stuff, but I just kind of think like it's good that they did it, but I don't really know the reasons why. So,
Well, so this was the next thing I wanted to bring up then. Is it enough to cancel the 4080 12 gigabyte in your opinion? Because I think the 4080 16 gig now needs to be 900 because it doesn't really matter. Like, and if we're not sure what the performance is, well, I mean, look at the teraflops. The 4080 12 gigabyte is half the bus of the 4090 and it has less than half the teraflops. It will be half the performance, which is around a 3080. So I think what we have is, I really do think Nvidia did everything they could to not compete with Ampere, and I still don't really expect the 4080 16 gig to do that well. I really don't. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's, I think everybody, I tend to think that, like, look at the 4090s, people lined up around the blocks for them, right? So nobody can get them, and everybody was saying, oh, no one's going to buy this card for $1,600, and like, no, they sold out
I
immediately.
thought they would.
Because I said it too, right? I'm with you. I was like, I knew people would like buy it because it's something new. And again, I think a lot of people really underestimate, like, oh, it's brand new. Because I will tell you, anybody shopping, they're going to want a 4080 over a 3080 because no one wants that lower number, right? So I do think it would sell no matter what. No matter what the review said, it would sell out. I mean, even the original 2000 cards were really everybody kind of dogged them. They still sold out really quickly. So I just think a lot of people don't think that hard about it. The reviews don't always kind of like, believe me, as a professional reviewer, a lot of people don't give a damn what we say, right? I mean,
let me ask the question I want to ask then, though. Although this fall has been insanely busy for most members of the Moore's Law is Dead team, there's one team member who's been allowed to take it quite easy recently, and, well, unless you're Reese, unless you're just a dog chilling on a fall afternoon, you could probably benefit from as little wasted time as possible, and you should probably then try Vite Ramen. Vite Ramen is a delicious American-crafted source of protein and nutrients that takes minutes to make without sacrificing taste. This includes their classic packages that make it easy to add protein and other ingredients of your choice while cooking, and their new Ramen Go packages that offer a healthy microwavable option for those who truly only have a 15-minute lunch break, whether you're back in the office now or still just working from home. Vite Ramen, you'll never be too busy to eat. And if you click the link in the description and use the offer code BROKENSILICON, you can save 10% off a variety of different products, including special bundles for Moore's Law Said fans, raw nudes if you want to make up your own recipes, and the Vite Go packages as well, and other cooking utensils and products. Whatever you'd prefer, using these offer codes really helps support Moore's Law is Dead tremendously, and it gets you a good deal on a healthy, fast to make, and tasty, reliable sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead. Try Vite Ramen today. Swiggles and Brett Summers, I combined their questions right in, and they say, hey, Tom and Gordon, the 4080 12 gigabyte is canceled. Do you think this is the first crack in the facade of NVIDIA's prestige? With AMD hot on their heels, an exhausted consumer base, and a recession staring down at gamers, do you think we can finally get just a shred of sympathy for us poors, or at least more consumer-focused competition and future feature improvements as they begin to defend these factors? Do you guys think this is AMD's time to take market share and mind share? Do you think NVIDIA's damaged their mind share so that AMD can, and left a big gap open with pricing? And will there be a backlash from gamers and the media around the 4060 16 gigabyte and in favor of AMD's RDNA 3 series?
Well, no. I don't think, the reason why NVIDIA can annoy the hell out of the community, some in the community, is because they're just that good. You talked about this earlier. They like, when the hell they ever failed ever since in the last 15 years. It's been a long time since they really kind of lost one. They are just good, and being that good means you get to do what you want. They are still, no matter what, AMD's been making some good products. They've never climbed up over 20%, if that. They don't lose. And as much as a lot of the hater voices kind of want to just dump on them, you can be that arrogant because you're that good. And that's what happens. So I don't think it'll make any difference. With the consumer backlash, I do think, though, there is a lot of opportunity for AMD to play against them right now, because that's what AMD does. They've been playing underdog against NVIDIA for a long time, and their designs, maybe they can underprice them to play that really well. So there's a potential they could do really well. But I will tell you, at the end of the day, 24 months from now, Nvidia will have like 80% market share, and just like that's just, I don't think that really has changed. I'm not like I'm saying I'm rooting one way or the other, but reality has taught me branding really matters. Branding really matters, and people, they want Nvidia. They don't want AMD. They don't want Intel, right? They want Nvidia because like, oh, it's got GeForce Experience. It's got everybody, all the streamers I know. It's just like they really win. I think they'd really have to screw up and have AMD surpass them in performance by a significant amount for them to really kind of like take a punch to the nose. But I don't see that happening with RDNA 3, even though it's going to have, I think they're going to play against the weaknesses of NVIDIA, but is it going to translate into more sales than suddenly AMD suddenly getting 80% of the market? I bet is highly doubtful, because NVIDIA is, their competitors are like, I will tell you, their competitors don't dog them. They go like, oh yeah, Nvidia, like, oh, they're like, everybody's like, they speak with respect when they talk about. There's two companies that speak about respect. One is Apple, the other one is Nvidia. So they know Nvidia does not, they don't fuck around, right? So that's basically, they know they have it. They got a lot cut out to beat them. I mean, hell, this launch is like these. It's funny to think 4090 without DisplayPort, 2 is kind of crazy, but
which I actually hear RDNA 3 will have DisplayPort 2.1, and it hasn't even been announced yet, which I'm trying to confirm.
Yeah.
What that will mean. I haven't been able to yet.
I don't either. So, but it's just so funny because I kind of like, they just basically, I remember I asked them like, why aren't you using DisplayPort 2? And they're like, well, it was what was available. It was like, so wait, you're saying
that's true?
Well, I got it. Well,
I'm not saying that's not what they told you. I'm saying I don't agree that that's what was available. We have DisplayPort 2.1 and RDNA 3. So,
oh no, I think they were saying that. Well, not 2.1, but 2.0. I think they were saying like it felt like, yeah, this thing has been sitting on the shelf so long that it wasn't. But again, I don't. Yeah, I know everybody really wants to see Nvidia fall because everybody wants to see the big one fall, right? Nobody likes dynasties. I'm wearing this reason why I'm wearing this Golden State Warriors shirt. Nobody likes dynasties. Everybody wants to crap talk them, but I don't see that happening. I'm definitely not going to put any money on like, oh yeah, this is it.
And it's just because it's like you'd have to see it to believe it, because. Even, and I'm sure like you've been around long enough that you remember, of course, like HD 4000, HD 5000, 7970. There's been times where AMD had just the 290X beat the Titan. The AMD's won, and it never really seemed to help their market share. So are you coming from that perspective? Like, it's not that you're counting out AMD. It's just you'd have to see anything work.
And it's just unfortunate because, I've had a lot of people go like, oh, for Zen, it was like, yeah, this is you should buy the CPU over, say, Coffee Lake, right? And they were like, I'm going to buy Intel because Intel makes me feel good, right? They know Intel's always worked for me.
But so that's not working anymore. That didn't solve Alder Lake. So my overall argument is it can happen to NVIDIA. We're just not there yet. AMD needs to win multiple times for it to happen.
Yeah, it would take sustained wins, right? I mean, yeah, clearly Zen 1 was, a little rough. Zen 2 was better. Zen 3 was like, oh, right? So, I mean, it took many generations of wins, clearer wins too, right? I mean, they were just like over 10th gen, over 11th gen was like not even a contest. So it would take that kind of dominance, I feel like, for AMD to, and it's hard for me to see AMD doing that. Although, again, AMD will play against the weaknesses of NVIDIA. I mean, I'm going to guess NVIDIA is in a worse position with inventory than AMD because there just weren't as many AMD cards out there.
Though AMD has issues, everyone's struggling.
But don't you think they can really play against the fact that NVIDIA can't come down and cut they just got to get rid of those 3,000 cards or just like
and that was right. That was an interesting thing James Pryor said, which his job at AMD was to segment products. So I was like, I know you don't work there anymore, James, but come on. What would you, if you're in the boardroom, what would you be telling them to do? And he interestingly said, I would make the 7900X $1,000 again, and I would make the 7800X like 700 or 800 again. Or not again, but So that's a price increase for the 7800X over the 6800X. And you'd say, hey, it's 5 nanometer, it's multiple chiplets. Guys, this costs more to make. What do you want from us? But then you'd say still 1,000 for the 7900 XT. And by the way, it almost matches the 4090 because trust us, we're making enough money at $1,000. And I think if they did that, well, let me ask you, as I was writing this down when you were talking, like kind of what the lineup would be. And this is kind of what I'm starting to suspect is going to happen, by the way. If AMD had a 7900 XT for $1,000 that was between 300 and 350 watts and was about 4090 in raster. So again, I think, kind of similar to last gen. Maybe they win 1080p. Maybe they win 1440p. Maybe they lose 4K against the 4090. But then in ray tracing, they lose. I do hear the ray tracing is going to be like way, way, way better, but not as good as Lovelace. So let's say the ray tracing is like easily over double what RDNA 2 was, but it's like, I don't know, right? 20 to 30% behind Lovelace, but it's $1,000. They basically match them in raster depending on the resolution. They use less energy. They lose ray tracing a little bit for just $1,000, which keep in mind what that would mean. It would still probably match or beat the 4080 at ray tracing and destroy it in raster. And they'd probably have some $700, $800 card that is the cut down configuration that, again, probably might be the cut down one might be the 4080 for $800 or something. Do you think that would be enough if they could supply enough supply, which was a huge problem with RDNA 2, they couldn't, to take market share? Because that's $600 less than the 4090. It's more efficient. And I think this will be an important factor. It fits in your frickin' case. Like that type of thing. Like, do you think that would be enough to finally like take a blow in market share here or not?
Yeah, I would. I mean, it's definitely going to help them move more cards than it has before. I mean, price is what everybody pays attention to, so it should help. I don't again think it's going to like, oh, we're going to wipe out 4090 because Nvidia will push. We've got all these advanced features and all this other stuff, and that does appeal to some people. But it isn't that kind of somewhat similar to what we saw with 6000 though. Was like, yeah, we're giving you better raster, better price, but did they ever get over 20%? So it's just tough. It's just tough to see it actually. Again, if I'm AMD, I will say and I'm a bean counter at AMD. I'm going to say, you know what? Let's make money.
Mm-hmm.
I like money. Shareholders like money. Let's make money. There's no reason to cut our throats. This is a good chance to make. And again,
well, and that's why
TSMC ain't giving us good prices on this stuff.
I do think they're getting better prices than Nvidia though. And remember, it's 6 nanometer for half of the silicon, and then 5 nanometer. So it is cheaper. It is cheaper to make than Lovelace. I mean, I guess I almost always would agree with that. It's just I feel like Nvidia really just the 4090s at the lower end of the pricing. Literally the exact number that I was told the lowest price it could be. The 4080, I think everyone expected that to be $1,000. 1200 is just this. People will compare this to Turing, but this is, I don't know. I just wonder if they really have left this opening where AMD walks over and they're like 4090 performance, it fits in your case, $1,000. Then they come out with another one better than 4080 performance, it fits in your case, it's $700. Like if there was any gen where that might work, I just wonder if it's this one.
Yeah.
But and to be clear, I do share some of your apprehension to believing anything works against Nvidia because I've thought they had better products before and no one bought it.
Yeah, and I definitely think the opening is here because more so, people really look. I still interpret the prices that are launched, the launch prices of the 4000 series as, especially the 4080s. I really think a lot of that is just because they couldn't sell it at a lower price because they've got, and Nvidia's huge problem is just that inventory, that excess inventory. That's just, they can't do anything until that's gone. So yeah, if you're AMD, now you play against that.
It's a unique opening.
Yeah, it's a unique opening. It'll, but Jensen in his press Q&A, he was like, we think the situation should, actually be in pretty good shape by the end of this year. I don't know what that means, but, publicly, remember, this is a publicly traded company and there are these things called lawyers and they like to sue you if you are not telling the truth. But
and they did when they lied about mining profits before.
Yeah, but it comes down to I think if they can get rid of these 3,000 parts, then they'll be in a better shape. But again, until that happens, AMD, they got a good opening. I'm with you on there. I think they got probably the best opening in a long time right here.
Well, and
right
I think
now.
they're going to do some pretty extreme things to get rid of stuff. Like I think there's already rumors circulating. I haven't followed up on them, but I've seen them out there that supposedly Nvidia is going to disable RTX 3080 dies into 3070 Ti configurations just so they can sell them with a cheaper board for below 600. So who knows? I mean, like I think it's totally conceivable. And there's rumors about a 3068 gigabyte as well. Like it's totally conceivable that what Nvidia does is they disable 3080s into 3070 Ti's, then drop the price to 500, and they disable 3070s into 3060s with 8 gigabytes, though, so a little better. And they drop that down to 300, and they just dump it. Like, and that would be a little hard to compete with too. But one question I want to bring up here is from Kinnahoon25, and he says, "Hey Tom and Gordon, do you think Nvidia will just rebrand the 4080 12 gigabyte to the 4070 for 700 or 650 or something? Do you think they expect the 7700 XT will beat it at 500 to 600, which, as you stated, Tom, launches in February? I don't remember being sure the 7700 XT is launched in February. Could it? I think that's the soonest I would expect it. But because again, AMD has to deal with the overstock situation as well, so I don't know why they'd launch a mid-range card. But yeah, what do you think? I actually have some pictures of the 4070. I'm trying to find creative ways to leak those, what it looks like without, burning some people. But so they have them. Like, let me just say that I've seen it. They have them. There's people holding them at Nvidia right now. I just don't think they want to launch them yet. But do you think they cut it down at all? Or do you think they might literally just call what the 4080 was the 4070 and launch it for below 700?
I would lean toward them rebranding it, right? Because clearly that was what kind of like pissed people off. I would think, but yeah, you're right. It comes down to what the competing parts are out there that they have to go against in price. Like
right, because if the 7800 XT is 700, I don't think they can be above 600 then. I don't think. Maybe they can. They have a lot of mind share,
Do you think they could still like lean on the fact that we've got better ray tracing, and ray tracing is significantly better, and then they've got DLSS 3 and all these kind of, all the advanced features, and then really, do you need rasterization for 900 frames a second kind of thing? I mean, who cares?
So it's interesting, like similar to Lovelace, when I talk to people, everyone as far as a year and a half ago said the exact raster performance we're seeing out of the 4090. But back then, no one was really sure about ray tracing. But over time, talking to people, because I couldn't get a firm number, is basically just asking engineers, what should it be? Like, I guess you don't know. And they said, like, theoretically, you should get at least a 25 to 50% increase in raster over ray tracing over raster, meaning you double ray tracing, you'll get between if you double raster performance, which they kind of did, then you're going to see 2.5 to 3x ray tracing, which we've seen. So that turned out pretty accurate. These types of conversations regarding RDNA 3 are kind of leading to like RDNA 3 at a minimum should have at least a 20% or more ray tracing increase over raster, just based on what I'm hearing about like the doubling of CUs per work or doubling of stream processors per work group. And without getting into the details, like if they tried nothing besides what we know about the design right now, we're talking about at least 2 to 2.5 times the ray tracing. At that level, that would place Navi 31, their top die, at least I think around 4080 12 gigabyte ray tracing. And that's if they do nothing, which I'm sure they are. So I expect, right, Nvidia basically 2.5x ray tracing, like 1.8x raster over Ampere. I think AMD is going to probably close to 3x ray tracing and almost double raster, which means they're making a bigger increase relative to their previous design than Nvidia is, but it's not going to catch up yet. But that's still enough where I would think the 7800 XT would beat the 4070 in ray tracing. I do. I think it will. How much, I don't know. I think there's almost no chance it loses though. Which, I'm sure everyone will be happy to send me this clip on Twitter if I'm wrong, but that's what it sounds like. So yeah, $700 card, maybe $800. If I was AMD, I'd be a bean counter and say this should be 800. I don't think the 4070 is going to be able to beat it in ray tracing. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but I wanted
I mean,
fully.
I mean, you don't know till we got them in people's hands. You know, that's kind of the problem of just kind of guessing here. And I'm always an outside observer on graphics because I only do the CPU stuff. But I mean, I do think it's going to be a really good for consumers, and I do think a little thing that's a little misplaced. I'm also just getting my soapbox here, but a lot of people are really angry about the new stuff being more expensive, which, by the way, new things cost more. I do think, though, that they shouldn't be so off-put that they go like, oh, I'm not going to do anything, because this is really going to be an awesome time to build a gaming computer, right? I mean,
oh yeah, especially Q1, I think.
I mean,
It's
isn't
gonna
this
be nuts.
really, we're looking at like the best time ever, especially after coming off, historic worst time ever. It's going to be like, you are just going to be feasting on graphics cards performance at the lowest possible time, at the lowest a dollar that you can get than we probably will have ever seen. Of course, you have to have a job, and hopefully people are going to have their jobs going into the next year, but that's a drag on it. But I do think like people are like, oh, all pissed off over I can't get this. Is like, yeah, okay, so you can't get your 4080, but you're going to be able to get 3080s, 3070 Ti's for really, really good. And the same thing with the AMD parts too, right? They're just, the prices are just going to be awesome. So,
well,
I wouldn't complain about that.
The funny thing is now that I'm thinking about it with you here, I think a lot of the 4070 pricing depends on if they're ever willing to lower 4080 costs, because my understanding, and they basically admitted it because they're talking about how the 4090 can push 600 watts if you want to. So clearly, look at the size of these coolers. I really do think Nvidia was going to launch it with two BIOSes. One of them will be 600 watts, one of them will be 450. And they said, this is stupid, cancel the 600 watt one. And I think that they were going to launch the 4080 16 gigabyte at 350 to 400 watts. I do. I don't know why else they'd be using that giant triple slot Founders for the 4080. It doesn't make any sense to use that on something that pulls the same energy as a 3080. It doesn't make any sense at all. So I think that there's a chance what we might see from an NVIDIA reaction, because all these expensive coolers and boards, the VRMs, these cost money. I almost wonder if like they're going to do a soft reboot eventually where they're like, this is the 4090E, this is the 4080E, this is the 4080 that uses 300 watts and the cooler is half as big and costs half as much, and now it's 1,000 or less. This is the 4090E, it's 1,400 or less because we're not way overbuilding it to use 600 watts. That's what I kind of wonder if that's what they're going to do, because I think they need to launch some version of the 4080 at 1,000 if they're going to make the 4070 600, because I don't know if we've ever seen a 70 class card launch at half the price of the 4080, which is they just gone so over the moon with pricing with the 4080 that's what I wonder.
Yeah, no, it is crazy. That spread is pretty gigantic. Or is this kind of what he said, is like, you know what, this ain't nothing getting cheaper. You're paying for leading edge. Nothing is getting cheaper anywhere. I kind of wonder if like maybe 4070 will just be way more expensive than people are used to paying for 4070 class card.
Well, and there's also the option that they don't need to do anything officially. They just tell AIB makers, hey, you don't need to use these 500 watt coolers for a 300 watt card. And we just see some newer 2-slot 4080s start dropping that are like 1,000 or less. They let the 4070 be 600. And I think there's because from what I've heard, Lovelace is capable of running GDDR7, which if that's ends up to be true, that'd be fascinating if they support GDDR7 and not DisplayPort 2.0. But like, I could totally see a Fermi like situation where they're like, we kind of like didn't think this out. We're going to launch the 4070 at 600. Kind of like, if I remember correctly, they launched the 4060, the 460, which is so funny going, we're just adding a 10. They launched the 460 using the top die, really cut down at a way lower price than the 480 to my memory, right? And everyone loved the 460. And then they launched the 500 series less than a year after the 400, and they're like, now the lineup makes sense. I do almost wonder if that's a better move. Like, they're NVIDIA, they need to get rid of Ampere stock. What if they just don't care? They don't care if they have bad next-gen sales for 6 months and they just launch a 5000 series where everything is where it needs to be because Ampere is finally sold out. That's another thing I've been thinking about.
No, I can see that too. I'm just trying to think back to the 460.
I know, so long ago.
That was a long time ago, so...
Well,
go ahead.
No, I mean, and I don't want to cut you off, but then let me just throw one more Nvidia question out there. Then, as we start getting towards the end of this, Brobos writes in and he says, "Is Nvidia using AI as a bridge for raw raster performance and ray tracing in DLSS 3, or are fake frames at high frame rates here to stay? Will DLSS 3 die off when raw performance replaces it if we keep getting these types of performance upgrades gen for gen over the next few years? And if so, is the die space allocated to AI features really just being repurposed in new ways every gen to make use of that die space that's used for AI features?" So I guess that's what he's kind of asking. Because I think that's a fair argument too. Like people are like, look at DLSS 3, and I'm like, I don't know, look at the 4090 run 4K at 200 frames without it. Do you even need it?
Yeah, I just think though that this is the path forward. The philosophy Nvidia is taking is, they obviously believe in AI and they believe that is the future. So I don't think this is simply to make up for lack of rasterization power. I think it really is. Their philosophy is, you know what, we are at the limits of what we can get out of silicon, right? I mean, Moore's law, again, Jensen agrees. Moore's law is dead. And you're not going to be able to just simply, push clocks and process down to get more performance. You got to get it somewhere else. So AI is the path forward. I think they've said that in their briefing, in fact, where they just kind of think, yeah, DLSS 3, they're quite impressed with it. And even though it's not perfect, but it is still pretty impressive for a 1.0 product. Even though it's got DLSS 3, if you think about it, it is just 1.0. And if you think back to DLSS 1.0, right, it was
horrible.
Yeah,
I thought it was just horrible at first, but
I mean, it got better, right? So I kind of think it's gonna get better
so that's interesting, right? Because I think DLSS 3, like the hardware unboxed review I watched, they basically said the artifacts are too much unless you can run the native frame rate you're using it on at like 80 hertz or more. And so basically he said DLSS 3 is for people that have a 240 hertz monitor and don't play competitive gaming. And I'm like, that seems like a 0% of people play at 240 hertz who don't want to be competitive. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, who does that? But, I was talking to Dan, the usual co-host of the news episode, and I was like, you know what, though? He did say it works really well in, like, Flight Simulator. Who's to say that, like, in 3 years, we won't have 480 hertz monitors that are far more standard? Who's to say that 240 hertz won't be more commonplace? And who's to say, like, they force you to use the low latency thing, reflex. Yeah, they force you to use reflex with DLSS 3. Reflex throws out frames, basically, from what I hear, that don't match up to lower latency when necessary. Who's to say they couldn't work on their algorithm better? And those frames that have the artifacts, they throw those out, and that also helps alleviate the latency issue they have with DLSS 3. And they fix VSync. Who's to say in 3 years 240 hertz monitors are more common, and they actually do improve the latency and the artifacting issue to the point where AMD better have an answer to DLSS 3. I know it sucks now, but I am honestly thinking I could see it getting to a point where it actually is very impressive in 3 years. Probably not for all games, but maybe half of them, and that's still a huge feature.
Right, and it's a big advantage over AMD and Intel, right? So it feels like that is the way that they think they can stay ahead of everybody. And I agree. I think this is a 1.0 product, and I think Hardware Unboxed themselves, they said, like, we consider 60 hertz panels to be slow, right? It's somewhat controversial. I think people are kind of like, well, what about consoles then? It's like, are you kidding?
And consoles support 120 hertz now, so I would say you're slower than consoles if you're at 60 hertz.
Yeah, but
some games.
Good luck pushing 120 frames a second out of a console. So but I think they're
they do though. Like, I played Borderlands 3. It's locked really? 120. So,
okay,
yeah.
Well,
the problem isn't a defense of consoles. This is me reminding people, guys, you're falling behind consoles if you're at 60 hertz.
I'm a PCMR guy, so I just like, any chance you can take the bag on consoles. But I just think that, yeah, 60 hertz is really horribly slow for gaming. So, yeah, you got 240 we're 480s out right now. So they've got 480 and they're pushing on. They want to get to 1,000 hertz, right, for panels. So it's going to keep going.
Yeah, and I think this is something that could pay off for them soon against AMD and Intel. Speaking of Intel, I don't know how much you want to spend on this, but there was one final subject on the script. I don't know how much you want to talk about it. Maybe you don't. And we've already been going pretty long, so let me know if there's a timeout here.
No.
I'll just ask, are you disappointed in Intel Alchemist so far? Like let's talk about this at least a little bit, because we did actually get quite a bit of reader mails about it in the comments.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everybody's disappointed because we feel like if you had released this 12 months before, things would have been fine. So how could you not be disappointed by the release of it? Yeah, performance is, it's pretty rough. But I sort of think it's like, what, they got the plane off the ground, but there's like maybe one landing gear that's not going to retract, and it's kind of like sputtering a little bit, but it's off the ground and it's gaining altitude. If it got off the ground and started to lose altitude, you got to be afraid. But I think it's actually, I would say it was a successful launch. It got off the pad and it didn't explode off the pad, right? So I think that is the good thing. But yeah, everybody wanted to see it 12 to 14 months ago. So yeah, there's no way around that.
What would you say is successful about this launch, though? Because I've been talking to retailers. It didn't even go on sale on Amazon.
Yeah.
They sold 3 at a few stores at Best Buy. There's less stock on Newegg than the 4090. And in fact, if you go to Amazon bestsellers, Alchemist isn't there. And the 4090s, one of them is, I think, the 4th best-selling GPU, which is crazy for a $1,600 card. Especially when like not even half the volumes hit markets yet. So I have to say, I don't agree this is a successful launch. They haven't sold any cards.
Well, look, so the thing is, like Adam, our video producer, he was trying to buy a 760 card. He put it in the cart, added it to go check out, and he bought it, and the email says, "Oh, actually, you're not getting this card." It's like, what? And he went back and he bought it again. It's like, they let him buy it on Newegg, and then he went back, and then it's like, sorry, this card. It's like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, and I had 4090s in my cart for hours. Those things were in stock. And
I was talking to Brett at UFD Tech. He went to Micro Center. He said that like 14090s at the Micro Center near his house. So, and
no Alchemist.
No, so again,
but how can we call this a launch?
Well, because
it's not out.
It's technically off the ground. People are starting it. They're slowly coming out, but again, it got off the ground.
If this was an AMD or Nvidia launch, people would be raising pitchforks in the street. Intel makes more revenue per year than both of these companies combined, and yet we're acting like they're a scrappy underdog.
Well, because they are a scrappy underdog.
They make $80 billion a year in revenue.
Yeah, how much? I mean, you can say that, but there's no, it's funny because
they make more than AMD and Nvidia combined times 2.
And yeah, I agree. They make a ton of money. They've got whatever. They're 10x the size of AMD.
And that's an underdog.
But if you don't think that the Arc is not an underdog in this game, it is definitely. I don't even honestly, Arc came out. Brad reviewed it and is like, no one should buy this card. Yeah, I mean, and I moderated that. It's like, yeah. Am I going to recommend that any kid buy this card? Hell no. Am I going to tell my friends, my sons and daughters' kids to buy this card for their first gaming PC? It's like, no, absolutely not. Go buy Nvidia, go buy AMD, because they're there, they work. Right?
But so is it a successful launch, or are we all just hoping if we pretend it is, it will become one?
Well, no, because it's one of those things if this thing, you also have to factor in this is going to go into pre-built. It's going to be bundled with stuff. And what is a launch? It can't
pass validation at Dell. It will eventually, but that's why it's
eventually.
Not there
yet. And I was funny. We talk about it on our podcast. It's like, because Elena was like, well, it'll get bundled. It's like, yeah, if I'm Dell, I'm like, no, I'm not putting this in until you fix these driver issues, right? So, but it will get there. And again, like I said, I think it very much is. The plane got off the runway. I guess in my book, it is a successful, barely getting off the ground. The fact that they even have it on a website and you're going to eventually be able to buy it. But again, they are the underdog by definition because they have no idea how to do this, right?
What if this is it? What if what we're seeing this week is what we see in volume this year? Would you change your opinion in a month?
I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'd have to do is I want to see, I mean, are they even going to break it out in their? Are they going to break it out in their public reports? I doubt it. It probably will not be broken out. But if we start to see it, show up in OEM boxes and bundled, and we see it out there, then yeah. But yeah, no, I guess this really kind of comes down to the question, that you're involved with intimately. You're sort of wrapped up as like, is ARC dead? Effectively dead. Do you think? Then I think
Well, let me say one thing before you continue that. Yeah. I want to be very clear. I broke the story, and the story's still evolving, and we won't know for 6 months. Like, let's be clear about this, because a lot of things you're saying is like the plane took off once we were able to buy it. What if we're not? Like I'm saying, I think a lot of people are counting chickens that have not hatched, and my whole point is, I don't know if they're hatching, guys, and I think there's this hope. If we pretend it's hatching, it is. But you just said it yourself, hundreds of 4090s at Micro Center, no ARC. From what I've heard, they got 5 at one I talked to. That's it. And they just got another 100 4090s. My understanding is there's probably going to be like another shipment of ARC. And again, this first shipment was like a handful of cards, like another handful in about a week or two. I don't know that anything's coming after that. Like, would that really convince you if that's all that came out from Alchemist?
I mean, if you're telling me that you're talking about handfuls of cards being sold, period.
And I don't mean
obviously not. I don't. But again, right, I don't.
When I say handfuls, I mean like I could hold them. That
yeah, no. I mean, yeah, no. That is not by definition. But I guess I'm saying I'm willing to go like, you know what, this is not going to happen overnight, and the fact that. So for some reason, Newegg thought they could sell A760s to people, but then they screwed up and they couldn't ship them.
A770s, yeah.
No, I think it was I think our ad was trying to buy it's the 750 card, right? He's trying to
save you from the comments because there'll be 100 comments that are.
It's like, oh my god, you're off by 20. Whatever. It's pretty close. Pretty close. You were rounding.
They're going to say you're off by 10 now.
I just think that clearly it is a problem if they don't ship more than handfuls. But I just honestly think that. This is like, should I be surprised that Intel can't even get the damn cards to retailers when the drivers are in the shape they're in? I think there's more leeway for this. Like we'll see. Like again, in 3 months, if like you cannot go out and buy a 770 or a 750 card, period, and you were never able to buy any, we will revisit that. That will be a serious discussion. But again, I can't look into the future. I don't know. I don't really know what is behind the fact that you can add the card to your cart, buy it, and then they say they cancel it. I don't know what's behind that. So, but I just think like, yeah, all indications are they are selling these things. And they're selling them as successfully as they are updating their, as the drivers are stapled together at this point, it looks like. So I'm not too surprised.
Well, so here's a scary thought too, though, or not really a scary thought so much as I think a window into like where I'm coming from on the whole stock thing. I've been saying all year that the production documents I saw said that they made these in late January through early March. And everyone's like, that's when they made 4 million cards. The 4 million Raja talked about, that's when they made them. Gamers Nexus tore down an A770 and it said made February 20th. And I was like, everything they're selling right now has been sitting in a warehouse since Q1. From what I've heard from multiple people is there are no plans to do another run of cards. So to put 4 million in perspective, AMD and Nvidia sell like 20 million a quarter. Like that's nuts. Like 4 million's nothing. So I just think we may have to consider that what we're seeing is stuff that they've been trickling out. And I don't know how many of these cards are the A380, right, versus the A770. Like, if I were to guess out of 4 million cards, at least half of them are the smaller one. So I just think it may be worth considering. They really haven't made almost any. And why would you make a whole lot of them, by the way, when NVIDIA's got a year's worth of Ampere cards on the market you already can't compete with? Because Intel's job is not to find interesting ways to lose money. It's bad business to sell a bunch of cards that cost as much to make as a 3070 Ti and are being sold for 3050 prices.
No, but but again, so like if there's really 4 million cards, that's more than a handful, right? So why the hell they can't get those cards out on the store shelves and into boxes? I don't know what that issue is, but if they got 4 million of these things,
That's not a lot when Nvidia when an AMD even sells like 5 million a month or something. Or
yeah,
like,
but I mean,
nothing.
but again, they probably said like, oh man, it's like this sucks. Let's not, this is like we are heading to a headwind. We're late. We don't need another 25 million of these things, right?
And they need to meet the release goals they promised to their investors. So think again, this 4 million cards, this needs to be divided up, which again is what like Nvidia or something sells a month. This needs to be divided up over a year into their laptop models, professional models, OEM models, do it yourself. Again, I just think there's a chance they may have only this many to sell to do it yourself, that it may feel like there's almost none. And I don't hear they're ever going to make more. So this might be a gasp and then they're done.
You really believe that?
Yes.
So, that gets to the crux of the
Let me ask you a question, though. If you're Pat, these cost as much to make as a 3070 Ti and you're selling them at cost, do you order more dies from TSMC, or do you put that money into Granite Rapids development?
Well,
because Intel's running out of money. This is not an endless amount of money anymore.
Yeah, but I think you have to look at that. The question is,
but like, would you do that? I'm saying I don't know what they're like. Let's pretend we don't know what they're really doing. Would you order more?
Well, it's funny because at Intel Innovation, Pat said like, look, my dream was when I left Intel, one of the things I left on the table was we need to make a discrete graphics card, right? And that's what he said, like, hey, we're doing that now. So, and it seems clear in the fact that, he had that card delivered to him by Raja is like, again, another symbol of the fact that there's at least one. He does appear to believe in it. And he publicly stated that, like, look, this is what I would always wanted to do. And the question is, if I'm Pat Gelsinger, and I go all the way back to i740. I don't remember if he was probably around for i740.
I think he's mentioned that specifically before.
If you go all the way back to i740, you come out, and I will tell you at the time, everybody said, oh my God, Intel, the gold standard of CPUs is getting into discrete graphics. Let me tell you, everybody said that is the end for ATI, 3DFX, Nvidia, all these other, like all the dozen of different graphics card vendors of that time. i7, because you don't bet against Intel. You're going to lose, right? i740 was essentially not great. It was okay. They did okay in the OEMs, but I mean, they were rapidly, overtaken by ATI and Nvidia and Matrox and all the other. They basically gave up after i752. They took the core of i740 and they throw it into the 810 chipset, which basically, in a way, I would argue, ruined PC gaming for a lot of people, because you basically had a graphics. You had this display chip integrated into the chipset. You could not even play any games on. And that was basically what the base PC that was sold to everybody in the early 2000s, late 90s, right? So if you go back in time and you say, like, you know what, we really blew it with i740. Let's just take the ball and go home. If they had said, like, you know what, there's a future in graphics, there's a future in parallel. If we just give up here, we are going to be giving up huge opportunities. I would think, though, yeah. It's easy to give up because you think there's like, we're not going to win. I mean, look at Nvidia. Nobody thinks Intel is going to beat Nvidia anytime soon. And it's really easy to think, let's just give up. But they gave up back then. And they're in this predicament now, I think, because they gave up back then. If they just said, let's just keep pushing forward, would Nvidia be the dominant vendor in data center for graphics today if Intel had just not given up in the late 90s? I think there's a lot to be said for it. And I don't know. I mean, that comes down to, can Intel survive without graphics? going forward.
They're not giving up on graphics, though. No one included, and I keep having to remind people.
You said that yourself too, right? Because you think data center is I think a lot of people misattributed what you've said to saying that they're done, they're going to give up everything, and that's not what you said.
Well, no, and actually before this recording, I was like, you know what? I almost feel like I'm getting gaslit by these so much that I have to like rewatch my own video because they're like, it's like they put so many words in my mouth. I rewatch my video. What I said is there will be a low volume Alchemist launch that will be weird and they will be hard to get. That has happened. I said after that, they will effectively stop selling Alchemist by next year. And then that's going to be it for high-end discrete for years. That is what I'm saying is going to happen. I'm not saying they won't launch a little laptop Battle Mage card. I'm saying there is no high-end Battle Mage die in development anymore. I'm telling you, there's not.
So what I'm saying is you're getting the classic. People read the headline and that's it because ARC is,
which even the headline said discrete effectively.
Yeah, I know, but it's a classic. Nobody ever watches your whole video and they just simply and
I made that one shorter on purpose, to try to make
they ran away with it, and you didn't say that, and that's the thing is like again, I don't know what the future is. I don't really sort of poke around at all these things, but I'm not sure. Again, I don't know. I have no. I got no. I don't really. I can go one way or the other. You're clearly. You think that this is the end. Right, we're not going to see Battle Mage
for at least the next
desktop.
Well, I mean, I'd almost argue we've barely seen Alchemist in discrete, and they said it launched in Q1. But I would say in terms of like an enthusiast desktop card, no. At least right now, they're not even working on one. So how they're going to pull that out in 1 year, I don't know.
Well, see, this is the problem though. Is we had Usman on our podcast recently, and. He's talked to people and he said the opposite, right? So, this is the problem with when we work with sourcing that you can't identify, and we know why you can't identify it because those people get fired and then they get sued, which is worse than being fired, right? We have to rely on the reporters. You're a reporter here. Usman's a reporter. There's other people that are covering this.
I feel embarrassed to be called a reporter, but I'm not sure if it's because I don't want to be called that or because I worry like that the bar's moved to a level where now I am called a reporter. But
it is essentially people are relying on what you're saying. And I think this is the thing is like you are putting your reputation on it, right? So if we don't see Battle Mage and the ARC, you still can't buy an A770.
You're going to see Battle Mage. They're going to have to launch something and call it Battle Mage.
But I mean on desktop.
Investors.
Right. On desktop.
Mean, if they do, it's not going to be high end, so.
I just kind of think it's tough because I don't know. I don't know.
Keep in mind, Battle Mage is targeting like one low end die, like first half of 2024. So that's what I'm saying is like when people are like, let's start rooting for ARC, it's like, all right, well, you can't even buy Alchemist. You're not going to be able to buy Alchemist. And Battle Mage at best launches a low end product 2024. Is this really a third competitor? That's my argument, and my argument is I don't think so. I don't think that looks like some Nvidia killer. And in fact, the funny thing is you bring up their old, i740. Yeah, that was when they should have doubled down on it, when they had the money. They don't have the money anymore. And that's why it's like anyone who told you to wait for Alchemist, and go watch my videos from 2020. I was so excited about Alchemist.
Oh, everybody was, right? Everybody got bought into the hype train. We all, and if you think about it, how stupid were we all to think like, yeah, you're going to come out and you're going to beat Nvidia, who never loses.
But in a couple of benchmarks, the top card did compete that I saw. So it's like, but as time went on, it became Q1 and I was like, where is it? And then all of a sudden, all the news became negative and I was like, I don't know what to tell you guys. I don't think you should be waiting for Alchemist. And anyone told you to keep waiting? Well, you waited for like a $300, something that's 20% more expensive than AMD's products that doesn't work. And anyone telling you to wait for high-end Battle Mage, it's going to end up being bad advice. That's my point. And all my job is to try to give gamers good advice. I'm telling you guys, it's effectively canceled if you want to make good decisions.
Well, I see that. I don't think based on the reviews themselves, nobody was recommending that people buy it, right?
Right, but
and they're
so many
very
people said wait for
very
Alchemist
slim.
to save the market, and you didn't have to wait.
Well,
Told
I
you.
mean, at the same time, it's just like, damn, it's just like, God, if we just wound the clock, it was like, I think you have to also remember, like, God, there was like, we were in this like historic drought of graphics cards. I mean, I've never in my entire lifetime ever seen it as bad as it was. Like, that was like 1,000-year GPU drought, right? And then people really, really wanted like something, anything. And then it just like the timing was so bad for it. Like, oh my God, like if you just could have pulled that in 12 months, it would have just changed everything. The narrative
They
would
could
be
have sold
so
it.
different.
Yeah,
even if
they could have
all
even
the
charged more
warts.
for it.
So even
Like-
with all the warts, yeah, they could have actually charged like more for it, and it would have been, now they're basically having to lower the price because of their market realities. Like and at the same time, it's a still, it does at least, undercut Nvidia somewhat until we see 3070 Ti's get lower and lower. I mean, we'll see how
Yeah, we'll see.
that goes, right? But I mean, and then again, we got to see the damn cards. Actually, you can buy the things, and you still can't buy them.
And it's almost November. It's not Q1.
But I just think the thing is, like, I don't know what to believe, because I know you've talked to people, and it's funny, when I was talking to Usman, he was like, it's entirely possible that we are, and then of course the YouTube comments took this like, well, no, you're just basically both being nice. It's like, he basically said, like, look, it's entirely possible we're both right, because everybody's talking to different sources and you are getting different information, right?
What I would say is people should just watch the video. What I said is there will be a low volume Alchemist launch. It won't help at all. That's what's happened. And then they're going to basically have no graphics cards next year, effectively, outside of their little token drops that they've been saving a little bit of those 4 million dies for the Raptor like mobile launch, of course. And then after that, Battle Mage isn't until like mid 2024, maybe early if we're lucky. And it's not a high end card. So, and then I've already heard half of the Celestial configurations are canceled. So this thing's on life support, and I don't consider any of this high end. I guess to go into like two people being right, it's like, well, I said Discrete's effectively canceled unless they launch a high-end Battle Mage card next year. I think that's what I was telling people.
Well, what's the definition of a high-end Battle Mage? Like,
that's a good point, because Intel's I mean, by that point, it's going to be over a year old. I mean, you would hope that they could launch something. They can't beat they can't match the 4090, which they launched on the same day as. So it is competing with Lovelace, not Ampere. This is current gen now. And then it can't match the 3090, and it can't match the 2080 Ti. That's what I consider enthusiast. So not only can it not compete with enthusiast, even though Intel's own charts say it's competing with enthusiast, they can't compete with this last or the previous gen. We're 3 gens of enthusiasts they can't compete with. So will Intel try to call a Battle Mage card that loses to the 5060, a high-end card, let alone the 4060 possibly? I don't know what they're going to say. But does that count in your mind? I don't consider 3050 performance enthusiast, but they seem to think it is I guess what I would say.
But I mean, I guess if they even get something out that is 5060, would you consider that like a win, or would you? So you would. A win
for who?
The problem,
because there's a difference between it being a win for consumers and them being truthful, right? This fall, where you're trying to stay warm and avoid scary activation fees for Windows software, consider using CDKeyOffer.com. CDKeyOffer.com is a long-term sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead and its community for any time anyone in this community needs legitimate Windows keys and doesn't feel like paying excessive monopolistic licensing fees to get access to them. But that's not all they offer either. They also have great deals on PlayStation PlayStation, Steam, Origin, and Uplay keys, and physical products like gaming chairs and keyboards as well. They are always running sales, but make sure you use the best codes possible provided for the Moore's Law is Dead community. Use the link in the description or on screen, and then use the code BROKENSILICON to get 25% off Windows codes or die shrink for 3% off everything else on the website. This really does help Moore's Law is Dead when you use these keys and click these links, and it helps you pay reasonable prices for products that, let's face it, you just kind of need sometimes and you don't want to overpay for. Go to cdkeyoffer.com today. Because they could launch something that's different than what they say they're going to, and I'd still think that might be a win for us.
I guess the problem to me is I don't know what to believe at this point, because you're very sure your sources have said is over. Like, this thing is on life support. They're coming in. They're firing up the paddles that try to like resuscitate that heart. And then I also, all the other people that I talk to that I have talked to people, again, not me, because I'm like, what's going on here? What do you think? And everybody is absolutely sure that it is not over. It's interestingly, I mean, but I don't know what the hell to believe at this point. It's kind of a problem. I don't know. Like, to me, that's why, like, I'm very much like, I don't look too far over the horizon, because I don't know if it's the crap's even going to show up. I kind of like, if we actually see the thing and that they're still going on, then to me is like, that's when we get there. People kind of want to cross 5 bridges before you even get there. And I don't know what to think.
That's what I said, like, I think 20 minutes ago. The story's evolving. So for me to be sure what this will look like, and I had a follow-up section of a video after that art cancellation link I put out where I said, I want to be clear. I don't think any of this is going to be easy to follow. I think it's going to be full of misdirection. I mean, Intel said they would have cards selling in Q1, and here we are in October. Like, if this is how messy the Alchemist launch looked, how messy do you guys think a half Battle Mage launch could look in 2024? Like, I don't know what Intel's going to do, because I can't fathom how they'll try to put a bow on this, but they're going to try. It's their job to try. So what I would say is, what I expect to happen is Alchemist product to trickle out in low volume to the point that it really doesn't matter for the next 6 months, and then it's gone. And then you're going to sit there and you're going to go, that was it? Where's Battle Mage? And then in 2024, they're going to launch some low-end card they'll try to call mid-range. And I'm going to say that does not count as a 5070 competitor, because it's losing to the 4070. And it's probably losing to, well, I mean, who knows, right, where we'll be at that point. But, and then I think that's when they'll decide if Celestial is coming out at all. Because basically what makes this so hard to cover is I'm not just talking to people like the decision makers, but I'm also talking to people working on these products. And they're like, yeah, we're not working on this top config anymore. And it seems like every month they cancel one of the Celestial or Battle Mage dies. So who's to say where we'll be at? But what I would hope for as a best case scenario is that Intel understands they really should have just launched one graphics card with Alchemist, that trying to do a full lineup was biting off way more than they can chew. And that if they understand that lesson, that what they should be doing then is launching one low-end card a year until their drivers are perfect, and then trying to do half a lineup even, and then a full lineup. Because, man, you don't build Rome in a day. Like, they need years to get their drivers on board, and to waste money that they don't have trying to compete in a market that's oversaturated is bad business. Because when people ask, I hope they continue, I feel like you're asking them to go out of business. They've lost $400 million. Or was it billion? I can't even keep track anymore of how much money AXG is losing this company. And I'm not going to ask Pat to go out of business just so that we can have a cheaper 4060.
The crazy thing about Intel Scale is, I remember they basically gave everybody this smartwatch at IDF. And it was really cool. I think it was a Basis smartwatch or whatever. And then they had to have a full recall on it because, like, somebody burned their like the LEDs were burning people slightly, like causing a slight pigment. They bought a company for smartwatches because, oh my God, the future of the PC, nobody cares.
But it was
about
the LEDs that did it, not the processor.
It was LEDs, right? So it was the LED it was really cool because it would do real time analysis. That's a lot of stuff that you're already seeing. You're now finally seeing, but this is years and years ago. They basically said, yeah, you know what? This ain't working. We're going to shut it down. It's like, shut it down. That was a $250 million acquisition. Yeah, we're just going to. I swear to God, the amount of times like Intel has thrown away like how many billions or how many millions
Optane. It just happened.
Well, I mean, that's why honestly, that's why I really, honestly, I'm like, you know what? After canceling Optane, you've gone this route forever and ever and ever, and and you get there and like you're gonna finally give up now. You just, at the same time, they basically said there was just no way. This is never going to work out, right? That's clearly what the answer was. It wasn't going to work out. I guess it fundamentally comes down, can they proceed with just a data center product? And I'm not sure they can, because I think they want to sell a card to data center. I mean, cloud gaming. And can you do a cloud gaming part without having the drivers? Can the work, this just feels like this is just one of those. They had to throw something overboard. They threw Optane overboard. And I'm not so sure that they're ready to throw. And again, I have no idea. I don't even, other than the body language of the people that I'm reading at the Intel Innovations. And believe me, the body language of everybody there was like, hell no, we're going forward. And that was everybody.
No, that's funny. That's not what I read on a lot of their body language.
Well, I mean, but I was, in fact, like when Raja answered that question, I was the one, Ian recorded it and I said, hey, I need you to go on the record. What's up with ARC? Is it, these reports, it's gone? He basically essentially reiterated what he'd said in his tweet. But
his tweet that said they're competing in enthusiast gaming this year.
And you have to remember, though, for them, at Raja's level, there's lawyers. There's like a lawyer lurking around every corner. They can't say shit. There's there are people ready to sue them if you go out a step of anything. And to me, like his answer, was it like, oh yeah, hell no, they're wrong. But I will tell you that other people at that event it was all, full steam ahead. And that was, what does that mean? Anything? Hell, I don't know. But but again,
his answer to me only gave me confidence that something's severely wrong. Like it was just nothing but nervousness. And he's like, I better not say anything we'll get sued over because we're dangerously close to that.
Well, but again, I mean, this is the same thing is like they can't ever, you can't answer it. I think it's
you can if you tell the truth. Well, you say ARC isn't coming out in Q1. They could have done that. Crazy idea.
I think the problem is the situation that they feel they're into now with this whole thing of this feedback loop. Intel is a company that notoriously will never comment on future products, on future roadmaps, because when you comment on future roadmaps and future products, you're going to get your ass sued, right? Because if it goes off the rails, you're going to get sued. And so I think that built in, they really feel like they how can they answer it? Can they get into a report that says ARC is dead without you can't. It's like answering, I think it would be the old answers like, when did you stop beating your wife? Well, I was like, I never did, right? And you just kind of you're caught in this, I can't lose, I can't win, right? Because I think that's kind of part of it. But again,
I think that's what's so obvious, though, is the way they answer questions is they don't know what to say yet because they know they're about to announce a lot of big changes. Are they going to come out and say ARC is canceled? Of course, they're not going to just say that. That'd be financial suicide.
Well, people want them to say that, though, right? They want them to let's get it on paper. You just need to say it, right? And they can't answer that.
Exactly, which is what I'm. It's like, unfortunately, I just have to accept that they're never going to answer anything in a satisfactory way. Period, because it's not in their interest to, and it's going to be a weird 2 years of seeing what actually comes out. And I think it's going to be mostly low end and at best mid-range laptop products with the occasional launch on desktop, like this launch we're seeing now where they can't even supply any graphics cards to Amazon, the biggest retailer.
Well, I mean, again, it's like Adam was trying to buy a 750 on Newegg and it'll let you add it and then can't. I don't know what the hell's up with that. But if they have 4 million of them, they got to do something with them, right? So I just don't. I don't know. So I guess the thing is, what exactly? Because it sounds like originally, if we never saw Battle Mage discrete, it was over.
No, and I said in that video we were going to see Battle Mage in some form.
I mean, on desktop. But you're saying, like, I guess what's your judge of when are you going to clear this cloud of saying that that Arc is effectively dead? When do you think when do you think you would say
that's a sad answer. I don't think we'll be able to answer it for 2 years.
Yeah, I mean that's a problem too, right? I mean,
I don't like that,
But I mean I very much am.
I don't think. Who knows? Maybe they'll just admit it, but I find that unlikely that they're going to do an Optane level, like gutting. But AXG is not going anywhere. They're going to keep making stuff, and I think they're going to make some data center products, and I think they're going to keep making. Or again, and it's like I don't even know what that means. I don't know what anything means over there anymore because nothing they do is obvious. But I think that they're going to keep developing Alchemist drivers for the cards they made in Q1 but aren't making anymore. And then they're going to launch some low-end laptop card in 2024. And yes, will that mean that there's some $150 desktop Battle Mage that can't even compete with Nvidia's mid-range? Maybe. I don't really consider that competing, though. I don't consider what Alchemist is competing, and I think it's going to be worse than what we're seeing now.
I guess if your price, I mean, like, again, if the price is right, it's not, there are just better options from other vendors, right? It's a risk. Again, if you're somebody who wants to take that adventure because you like adventures, then maybe it's right for you, but that's not most people. I guess I'm just trying to figure out where.
But again, like, Intel's going to argue it wasn't canceled. You can't buy it on Amazon.
Well, you can't.
Why are we playing in La La Land here, just walking around a circus of like misdirection? Like, you can't buy it on Amazon.
I think if within, because clear. I mean, again, is there anything?
I don't tell consumers to go to a Micro Center to buy a card they can't buy and then pretend it's out.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is, again, like, if there's anything here that Intel has done right on Arc, like, this is actually sort of like, oh, this is actually exactly how it should have come out, because you can't buy the card that is supposedly out, but it's like, it'll turn out like, yeah, it was on a boat that got like ran out of fuel, or the propeller broke, right? And it just like, they were just like some kind of like they've cursed the hardware gods on this. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, if in 2 months you can buy this all day on Amazon and Newegg, then that kind of changes it. If in 2 months you can't buy these damn things, then
Alchemist launched in Q1, though,
right? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but what I'm saying is, when I talk about like Arc being effectively canceled, I'm not really interested in Alchemist. I mean, this boat's kind of sailed. Like, this thing is, I'm talking about Battle Mage and stuff. So, I mean, is there going to be a day you can buy Alchemist? I don't know, but like, is a day count? Wouldn't you want this to be supplied for months? Like, is this the bar we're setting for Intel? You can buy Intel and AMD cards.
I mean, again, reviews were not necessarily kind to this card. There's a good chance you'll be able to buy it, right? If whatever that boat finally pulls up to the harbor. But
I have one on back order, and if I actually end up getting it, I'm going to keep it for collector's purposes. And again,
with your i740.
Yeah, well, I do have a DG1 card. I don't have an i740 though. But yeah, what I would say is, at the end of the day, if it's on sale for one day, I guess I could believe that. But I really just think it's not. Nvidia sells more cards per month than Intel made for 2 years. They're not I think people really overestimate how little stock this is, even if it gets bad reviews. That's all I'm saying. I think it's entirely explainable why it's hard to get, because they need to save those 4 million cards to launch the laptop. They're not going to make any money to do it yourself, so they'd be better just bundling it with Dell laptops, like that. They'll make more margins there, probably. Probably.
But if the drivers aren't ready on desktop, who's going to take it in their laptop where it's pretty permanent? So
no one now until Q1, probably.
So I guess what I want to know is, if we see Battle Mage and we see Celestial and we see whatever D or E and F at some point, do you go like, yeah, you know what?
If
They were
Battle
wrong.
Mage
If we're
launches
looking at
next
this in
year,
2028,
if Battle Mage launches next year and it competes with the 4070,
then yeah. I mean, that's of course
then that's better than that's the. But and it's so hard to answer this question because I'm not like avoiding it. I'm telling you, this is a hard question to answer because of how bizarre this is. Like I'm telling you, it's hard for me to because I have to like deal with like 5 moving targets and like wade through all these weird statements and like think like, well, but like, how are they going to portray it? How are they going to argue it? Like, but I can come up with examples where I would definitely be wrong, and that's one, right?
yeah. So if I mean, it'd be if they can't hit a 4070 in target, then like, what do they do, right? I don't know. I mean, I guess they price it lower, but I mean, but the fact that they're actually shipping something in desktop sort of, and of course we're gonna
But
say,
I said in that video they're going to launch a Battle Mage product, so I'm not saying they won't. I'm just saying it won't be worth getting gamers. It'll be effectively like a non-factor.
well, oh, okay. So I guess a lot of
Effectively
people,
canceled.
I guess a lot of people really misinterpreted that
They
because
should watch the video from start to finish.
yeah, I think it's the problem is that a lot of people like, because I think a lot of people see that as like it not shipping is what you're basically saying is like, but isn't that sort
Did
of
Alchemist ship in Q1? They say it did.
Isn't that some semantics though? Because like at the same time,
It's all semantics with Intel. Yeah.
well, I mean, with it, but like if it effectively canceled means, do you mean not worth buying, or do you mean them not? Because like canceled, like even the
no, I mean like
4080?
they're not. No, I mean like they're not competing even there. Like so,
Yeah.
if it's in high volume, right, on desktop above, close to a 4070, even if it sucks, like right, let's say I don't think this is what will happen at all, by the way, but let's say it's a 400 watt card that competes with the 4070 and it's easy to buy. Oh, I'm still wrong if it's 400 watts and easy to buy, right? I wouldn't recommend it, but I'd still definitely be wrong. It's in high volume then. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess like it's funny because I like the word canceled. Like I don't even agree with our own headline on the 4080. I don't think the 4080 was canceled.
Oh, it was unlaunched. You see, even Nvidia plays this game. So and that's my point is like, guys, this is always going to be an annoying discussion. It just is because it's not in this company's interest to say things that make them look bad. So they're never going to say this, Yeah, it doesn't matter what happens.
It's their job, to be honest.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because and that's the problem with consumers, especially with enthusiast focused gamers, where they think these companies exist for us. Like, oh my God, you're here to make my life better. It's like, no, you're here to make our life better by giving us your money. Because you are basically buying our product. That's the only thing that matters. Is like, as long as you give us the money, that's all that matters. They're not here to make anything better. They're not your friends. They just want your money. I will tell you, that's one thing I can tell you has been constant over the entire time I've done this, is they like your money and they like to continue to take your money. So they don't care about you, because if at the first opportunity that works for them, they will push you overboard, because that's how for-profit companies work. They're not loyal to us. They're loyal to the people that gave them their money to make more money. So I think people need to get past this sometimes, because there's very much oh my God, the ownership kind of like, oh my God, you need to do this the way I want it, or like they're not going to do it. If like, you know what, if I can make another 20% selling to miners, what do you think my shareholders are going to say if I say no? I don't want the gamers to be unhappy. That's not how it works. That's just not how it works.
Well, that's absolutely true. But I also see people go the other direction, where they kind of just start going, oh, well, so then they're all evil. And then sometimes they do pretty screwed up stuff. Let's be clear, but it's usually not malicious. They're trying to make money. It's not good or bad. It's just how it works. So,
right.
I don't think these companies are trying to, because sometimes and it really does annoy me when I see people, especially about even Intel Arc, where they're like, well, I hope they launch this so NVIDIA's graphics cards get cheaper. And it's like, well, their job isn't just to make your NVIDIA fanboy life easier over here, but also their job isn't to be evil. And I just think we have to understand that the things these companies are doing, there is numbers behind it. Intel basically soft launching Alchemist and never really making it easy to buy is because it's a bad product that would be a waste of money to make. And if they only launch like low end cards for Battle Mage, it's so they can keep doing driver development, and because they're not going to make any money trying to compete with the 5070. They know they won't. And it would be a bad business decision for them to keep doing that. It's not about if they can see it through. Hopefully, what I really hope happens is they make one low-end die every year, or wherever it is, every year and a half, get their drivers perfect. And I would recommend after the Celestial low-end one, they have to rebrand, because I'm sorry, like the Arc brand doesn't, I would say just keep it going in the low end and then do a reboot of the entire XC product line. That's what I think they need to do. But until they have drivers that work, until they're sure they can launch even 3 cards on time that like can compete, they need to launch one Celestial die that is even competitive with the 6050 and like at everything, efficiency, and once they do that, then make 2 dies. Like, because everything else right now, I mean, Pat's telling his employees in internal Q&As that they have worse margins than AMD, and they won't be able to compete in price if they don't get their overhead down, which is where these layoffs are coming from. It just bothers me because the people are like, I hope they keep making ARC so that they can lay off more people to make products that you're not going to buy. Well, I don't know.
The thing about all consumers is they don't care about the companies, like, right? I mean, they want it to benefit them. And I've always said this, like, even about like when Zen first came out, I was like, Zen is really, really impressive. And a lot of people are like, oh, great, because that's going to force Intel to lower prices so I can buy more Intel parts. It's like, okay, aren't you supposed to like reward the better product? It's like, no, because they want the product that they're familiar with is, it's a little more robust. Hey, maybe the USB ports work all the time, right? Those kind of things that kind of add up. But I always felt like, because the response was always like, I basically want to look like I'm interested in somebody else so I can get this other person like me. It's like, that's kind of wrong on the person that you're trying to pretend that to court, So but I just think like people want to they want ARC to succeed, and they don't care if Intel loses money. I mean, that is a pattern I'm frankly not surprised by.
Which, to the people that don't care, I think they're about to lay off over 10,000 people.
Yeah. I mean,
these are real people with families, guys, and you're asking Intel to keep making stuff that's going to cause more families to have problems.
But that's
like, this is like just ridiculous.
You can wade into the comments and people will like they don't care, and that's just kind of the nature of people, I think. But also, I think, again, I don't know what is going on at Intel. I do know that, like,
I don't think even they do most of the time anymore. But
when you have a company that big, and this has been a problem, it's a really big company, and there's all different fiefdoms. There's people. You have different parts of Intel that want to shiv the other parts of Intel because it benefits them, right? So, I'm hearing you a little clearer now, because you're basically saying, like, if by effectively canceled, you're saying this is such a loser product, there's no point.
Well, no, and they're not even trying to compete where they said they are trying to right now, too. So, like, will they make something they call Battle Mage? Yes, but go look at their roadmap. They said they're going to compete in Enthusiast next year. I'm telling you, they're not. So that is canceled, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I mean,
everything they put a sticker on that says Battle Mage canceled, and they're going to try to argue a lot. I don't know.
I guess when you say canceled, that means like not coming out, period.
Yeah, no Enthusiast Battle Mage is coming out.
Well, I mean, that's the problem.
I'm not saying bad products. I'm saying no Enthusiast, which is not up for debate what that means, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I mean, so like, I would interpret cancel to mean it's not coming out, period. What you're saying is like Nvidia will outclass them. AMD will outclass them. That it'll be relegated to competing with lower end parts, right?
Yes, but with the distinction that they are canceling parts of the lineup, though. They are literally canceling. Like, this isn't me dancing around the answer. I'm saying, no, but they are canceling the high end. Like, it is gone. That was a cancellation. It's not an unlaunch, Nvidia. It's canceled. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, it's like that whole, that unlaunch thing. And again, what does canceled mean? If they reintroduce 4080, 12 gig, and 3 1/4?
Which is why I think they said on launch. I think They're leaving that 5% chance they'll do that. I think all the things these companies say, this is what my job's kind of become, is reading between the lines. Like, people can go back and listen to a Broken Silicon where Nvidia or Intel announced Arc will be on shelves Q1. And I said, Dan, it's not launching Q1. And he's like, they said it is. I said, no, it's going to be on shelves, but not for sale. And that is what they argued a month later. And I'm like, these types of little marketing speak. You guys got to, these little things they say. When Raja Kadori nervously says, we're still sticking to the strategy now, but won't say specifics, he's dancing around the question. Like, that's what's going on, guys.
Yeah. I mean,
and it's hard to give concrete answers because they won't give concrete information. So how can I give an answer?
Well, that's a problem. Is they legally cannot even give us hard answers. Like, a lot of times they'll all do interviews with, fairly high end, high place executive. They can't. To me, is like, it's almost very pointless, because the information that you get out of an executive is of very little value, because they are playing high stakes poker with the cards held very close to their chest.
Unless it's an executive who's not speaking publicly.
Well, yeah, that's different. But I mean, if it's for attribution, then that's it gets different, sticky. But I'm just saying that these companies generally, they publicly, which is publicly confirming that, and that was on the record. Remember, that was when Raja answered that question. That was in front of like 40 different, journalists from around the world. He basically was like, he wasn't going to answer because he can't answer it. So they can't.
Right. He can't answer it, guys.
They can't. Well, they can't answer it because, but at the same time, the publicly stated thing is like, we are executing. Again, you remember, there's lawyers lurking at everything. We are sticking with our roadmap. The roadmap says we're doing A, B, and C. So, that makes lawyers happy, right?
I'm sorry, I was talking to a source who was actually messaging me about Intel, so I was like, well, crap, we're talking about it now. What the heck's going on?
You want to talk about that, or is that too secret?
No, it's too soon. Yeah. I've tried to talk about things before I ran it past a dozen people and thought about it. And it sometimes what you're told can actually be the opposite of what you're told if you don't take time to think about what you're told. If that makes any sense.
No, of course, because you don't. That's why, again, like, I don't really get into the whole trying to predict the future thing, because a lot of it is they don't know. That's the sort of the really sticky mess here, is like, they don't know. And do you really know if you're talking to people who don't really know then? And then to me, it's just like, give me the product. I'll tell you if you should buy it or not. Here's where you place it. It's just like, that's kind of pretty much where I'm at these, because that's the only time it's concrete is when you get it. Because a lot of times it's very, very easy to get, as they say, you get ahead of your skis, right? And I don't know, because I don't even know half these secret code names, because I don't care. Because until the damn thing comes out and it's got a whatever brand on it, it's just,
Which again, to put a bow on this conversation, it's just like, in the original Arc cancellation leak, what I said is there will be a low volume, hard to buy Alchemist launch. Then it will be, I don't know if I actually said that in that video, but I said it in successive ones. Then it's going to be pretty much impossible to buy next year. That's going to be like a whole year where you can't get Alchemist. Battle Mages 2024, they have canceled the majority of the dies. It's just a low end. It depends when it comes out, right? Because if it came out early next year, like 2023, maybe it's mid-range. But based on the specs I'm hearing, it's going to be a low end card for 2024. And then right now they've canceled half of the Celestial configurations, and every month it seems like they cancel another die. So that's what's going on now. Is that count as canceled? I think it means discrete enthusiasts certainly is, and all of their roadmaps say they're competing in the high end next year, and I'm telling you, they're not going to. That's canceled in my book. Are they going to say we've canceled Arc? Hell no. They're not going to say that. That'd be at least I don't think they will. It'd blow my mind if they decide to actually do that.
Well, I mean,
and that's the best answer I can give, because that's the situation now. In my mind, that means that roadmap they keep pointing to on Twitter is wrong, and they're saying it's not, and it's just so dishonest to gamers. But outside of that, all I can say is, yeah, we'll see if they change their mind. But right now, it's suicide to launch any graphics cards into this market, so I don't think they're going to for at least a year.
Yeah, it's but at the same time, I don't know.
And that's my best answer. What I would say is no enthusiast gamers should be expecting to buy an Intel graphics card over the next 2 years.
I honestly think anybody who it's just so silly. Like that whole original whatever hashtag wait for whatever thing. Just like don't wait for anything. I mean, you just kind of like you got parts you can buy right now. You see they're going to launch a new card. You're like, hey, right now 13 Gen is launching really soon. Should you wait for it? Yeah, why not? Right? I would say, sure. I'd probably wait for it, but I'm like to do a whole hashtag
in a week, but
to do a whole hashtag wait for something like honestly, like I wouldn't wait for anything at this point from definitely on ARC, because why would you? I mean, like you already got stuff you can buy right now. It's clearly not going to change the world, right? So, but at the same time, do I want to go out and buy a 4090 or do I want to see what AMD has in November? You know what? It's so close. Why not? I think that is really good advice. You probably want to wait, but at the same time, like we were saying, I was like, you know what? These 4090s are going to be gone and you don't know when they're going to come back. Maybe you should just buy it. I don't think they're going to change it, but I don't know if that's just sort of like make things worse, kind of like, but I just think people shouldn't like get into these whole like hashtag wait for it. That's part of the hype campaign that all companies want you to do is like wait for our stuff. That's part of the FUD. They don't want you to like buy their product. You wait for their product, but it's just like,
what happens if it's not really in stock, like, because what I hear is that Raptor Lake volume might not be very good for the first month. So if you waited for it and you couldn't buy it, and I kind of wonder if that's what AMD's banking on, is they're like, oh, they're going to go try to buy Raptor Lake, and we got pallets of Zen 4 in stock, and boom, Zen 4 sale, which is kind of what Nvidia's done to AMD multiple times with graphics card launches as well. As they have no stock, AMD card launches, all of a sudden you can buy a 3060 or something, so
yeah.
What I would say is anyone waiting for RDNA 3, you're probably going to wait anyways. Like if you're a professional who's doing rendering, 4090 met all, again, reasonable, I think, expectations. Get it now if you can. And they're in pretty high availability. Like they're in stock at multiple micro centers. Go get one.
Are they really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And actually, from what I've heard is, I can't say what caused it.
To buy one.
I should have one on the way here, but again, we'll see. But what I've heard is that the half of the stock hasn't even gotten here. So like that they've had pretty crazy, well, there are reasons the shipping's taken a while, but anyways.
How do you feel about pre-orders? Because like there's this hard rule by a lot of people out there. It's like I never pre-order. I'm like, you know what? Honestly, sometimes it's actually fine to pre-order. Like if you know it's going to be impacted in your odds.
In general,
and you can't wait.
Yeah, in general, I wouldn't recommend it, right? But it just depends on the product, because it's like if you're someone who wants an i9-13900K, I don't know what you're waiting for. You can buy the 7950X now. What if it's hard to get? What did you wait for then? But if you're someone waiting for the i5, that's a different situation, though. Like you probably can wait. Money probably means more to you. I still wouldn't pre-order it, but I would try to get it if you can. And if you can't, just get the best thing that's on the market. And I would say the same thing about everything coming out right now is the shortages are pretty much over, and assuming no World War III completely breaks out. And which is somewhat of a decent if, but like everything's going to, I think, keep getting cheaper every month over the next 6 months. But the thing is, if you buy now, it was a lot cheaper than 3 months ago. So it's not like you should feel that bad.
Yeah, no, really. You kind of wonder where the bottom is, but it feels like the bottom could be. It does feel like the bottom is like, oh, we got a ways to go to the bottom. Like, there was that controversy over you should buy 3090 now or 3090 Ti. And it's like, oh, okay. No, there's definitely, to me, like, it feels like the 30 series is like, it's going to be hard to justify paying a lot of money for a high-end 30 series at this point. To me, it's just like, I wouldn't want to do it.
Well, and something I've been talking to people about that I think is pretty interesting is just this idea of like when people shoot their shot, they've shot it. Like Lovelace could be 3 times better than Ampere. And Ampere was RDNA 2 and Ampere were pretty big performance increases respectively. But Lovelace is a bigger one than Ampere is, and I think RDNA 3 is at least going to be comparable to RDNA 2, depending, if you're talking about raster or ray tracing. So, but does that matter to someone who already bought and built their PC? I don't think so. I think people built during the quarantine when they had time to game inside. They built it. Now we're in a recession. Could be 4 times better. People aren't buying it, So I think that's a big thing that we're just kind of seeing, and these companies need to accept that if they double sales one year, you're gonna have slower sales the next year, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it kind of came up like because like clearly the 3080s are like, do you want to just like cut the prices on these damn things and just get them out of here, get them out of the way, the old stock? But at the same time, somebody's going to buy 3080 is not going to line up again to buy another graphics card for a while,
Mm-hmm.
So isn't it better just to like put them in the as people weren't like, should they put them in that landfill with the AT cartridges? Like, is that feasible? I don't know, but like, would they rather sell you a next generation die, or do you want to have an old part basically occupy that person for the next 3 years, or take them out of pocket for many years? So
well, the weird thing is, I had people telling me that months ago, like 3 months ago, like the overstock situation was so bad, but Nvidia was doing something to handle it with AIBs. What I thought they were doing was buying up like GA102 dies, and I thought, well, maybe they were planning to use Lovelace for the next gen of GeForce Now. Well, now you've got an overstock of Ampere. Let's just use a bunch of 3080 12 gigabytes. Probably better to do that. And then you can get rid of them or turn them into a bunch of A5000s and then sell them for half off. Like you sell A5000s for $1,200. You're still making money on it, compared to trying to sell a 3080 for $500, which EVGA said this themselves. They lose money there. So I don't think they can afford to do that. What it seems like Nvidia did, which is just like some super villain level thinking, is it seems like they bought up the overstock and then undercut EVGA, which made EVGA leave the market. When you see those like $1,100 3090 Ti's on Best Buy, it seems like they bought up EVGA's overstock and then undercut them with it, which is just nuts. I mean, I'd be mad if I was EVGA too. So should they have just put them in a landfill, or a metaphorical landfill, like sold a bunch of A5000s for half off? That's what I thought they were going to do, but it seems like they're insistent on trying to sell them. And I don't know when they give up on that, but I don't know. I think it's just all a matter of, but then you also got to remember, from what I'm hearing, they bought up more capacity from TSMC with Lovelace than they did with Ampere, and TSMC is going to make them pay it. So, or I think they may have even paid up front.
Well, because they had to book it ahead of time, because that was just the way it was, right? I think they said that during that Q&A. It was like it went from, a few months to you need to book out for 2 years during the pandemic when everybody needed every single piece of silicon ever. And now, the bottom's dropped out. So,
but yeah, I don't know what Nvidia does overall, because I hear a lot of people say things like they think Nvidia's like their last earnings was bad, not Intel bad, but worse than AMD's, relatively speaking. And I don't know. I worry that they're going to have one surprise bombshell one eventually, because if it's true they have a year's worth of stock, and then also they're going to have, I think the 4090 will sell fine. In fact, if I was Nvidia, I'd be switching capacity over to the 4090 if they can, because I mean, even you just have to, because that's the only one people are going to want in this lineup until Ampere sells out. But I do wonder. I don't know. I do wonder if they just need to do a write-off and landfill these cards, or it sounds like it, right? I don't know.
It's just funny because people think you go to the exact same landfill as the the famed DT cartridges, but I don't think that's realistic. But it's just the thought of a dump truck just kind of like pouring all these graphics cards into
just 1 year after we couldn't get one, Yeah,
no, right? I mean, it's just insanity to go from a drought to basically, monsoon, where you can't stop. And I think, it's when Nvidia is always the villain, it's easy to be the villain because, you're always winning. But at the same time, What they had to eat that like $1.3 billion. You got to pay that $1.3 billion somewhere. So, and business is not friendly. If they have to cut like even their own partners' throats to get there, then it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but that's the way business is sometimes. It's terrible, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, let me throw in one final reader mail here because I'm starting to get a little tired and I don't want to get to a point where I'm just like, rambling and speaking in tongues because I don't even know what I'm saying
I
anymore.
speak in rambles, so that's what I'm here for.
So far, I think we're holding it together, but I'm worried we're on borrowed time. Minnie Cooper writes in and he says, "Hi, Tom and Gordon. Do you think GPU demand being artificially inflated since around 2012 when people first started mining Bitcoin and then moved to Ethereum? Now, Ethereum has moved to proof of stake. There's literally no use for GPUs in mining anymore. It makes me think that maybe we'll see a massive decline in demand from GPUs moving forward. Do you think prices of GPUs will slowly come down moving forward because of this, or can you see some other innovation or thing using GPUs and propping up demand? AI maybe? All the best." Well, I just got to correct a few things here. Bitcoin's basically stopped being mined by GPUs in 2012. That's when people moved to Litecoin. I know because I was one of them. And then they moved to Ethereum. And then Ethereum just moved to proof of stake. And there are still coins they can mine with it, but it's far less profitable than it used to be. And then I just want to give my answer here too. After correcting that, a lot of professional people in AI and data research look at gamers the same way gamers look at miners. They go, "You're using a 100 teraflop GPU to play Call of Duty?" Like, so that's the only thing I want to point out to people is there's a lot of use for graphics cards outside of gaming. And I think the problem we have now is they just made too many. And one of the uses fell apart, mining. There's still going to be a lot of uses in the future, but I don't know how you would answer that question.
Well, I mean, it gets to the point of like, I'm wondering if the bottom dropping out on PC and gaming, I mean, by connection, gaming will spur the mainstream media to say the PC is dead again. We know they always kind of break that one out every few years.
And everyone's going to game on iPads instead of consoles or desktops, right?
Which is funny because that goes back to about 2010, 2012, when it was the end of the PC because everybody's going to use the iPad. I don't think that's going to happen. It's clear the PC is not going anywhere, and there will be more people playing games now that haven't been able to, fortunately, if they, again, the world economy does not tip over and explode into flames. I know. Prices are going to come down, which is the best thing ever about. And as much as you can't buy an A770, the fact that Nvidia and AMD want to make sure that they can put a stake into Intel's heart, they are going to lower prices, and they're going to be competition's always better, right? It's prices will get better, and there will always be PC gaming. It's not going away ever. So I think,
but there's always going to be things that pop up. I think that make GPUs hard to get every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mining thing, maybe this might be finally it. But a lot of people who
I don't know more, so, but
yeah, I mean,
that's its own discussion.
I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like a lot of people say, no, it's going to come back again. Okay, I don't know. Sometimes I kind of think.
But when, for what reason, let's not count our chickens.
No, yeah, let's not.
If I knew when it was, I would become a billionaire because I buy them all up at the perfect time, but I don't.
God, sometimes I almost wonder if if you're one of those miners that had a massive farm and you got all these damn cards, you already spent too much money for, you're not going to, you've already made your fortune. But you're not going to be able to sell these cards at the profit you thought you could, or at least to lower the loss on them. Why not just put them in the closet and hope that when it comes around again, you can profit off of them? Because you're not going to sell this 3080 now for $900 that you were hoping for.
A lot of these people you talk to, it's because they were over leveraged and they took out loans to buy a warehouse and stuff. Not all of them. So a lot of them are that smart, and a lot of them sold 4 months ago, not now, but not all of them. And I don't know. If you time things, the people who time things better make more money. So
yeah, if you're the first one out the fire exit, it's not a panic.
Yeah. So, I mean, you look at was it I think someone presented an algorithm. My brother was telling me this to investors, and they said, wow, this stock trading algorithm is so incredible. How did you program Goldfish? And he said, it's just based on how my goldfish moves. And it beat one of their analysts, so this is hard, and that's why they time these things badly sometimes.
Yeah, I do wonder about the over-leveraged people. I mean, then you just sell it then you're selling used 30 series cards at cut rate prices because it's better than, eating the total cost. But
well, and if they've already made the money they need to make, they might not care if they sell it half off.
Right.
That was just a gamble they were willing to make.
That's why I have this controversial position that you shouldn't buy used mining cards if the price is like very high. Like if you're selling,
it's high.
Well,
I'm looking what it is now though, because I saw 3060s being sold in bulk for like $250, and it's like, well, there you go.
That's not bad. Like if there was a point where like clearly some of the people are like, try to sell you mining 3060s for $500. It's like, no, go pound sand.
And there were people making arguments that you should get used cards like for like 10% less than a new card. I'm like, no,
yeah, right.
What happened? I remember when used cards used to be like 30% less or more, like they should be. And a lot of these come with 30-day warranties too. So as long as you have that, if it doesn't break in 30 days, it's pretty unlikely it'll break after that, unless it's the fan breaking, of course, which any used card, you should be ready for that. But let's do one more. Chris Rich writes in and he says, are GPUs getting too big, too power hungry, and too expensive for their own good? Or are you happy with how GPUs are developing? If you think that the market is due for a reality check, what do you think needs to change most? And actually, this question reminded me what I was going to say, which is to say, look, right now, I think Nvidia is used to making like 50% margins on these, like a third of the cost is profit for them or something like that. I think they're used to that now. If they go through bad financial times and things force these cards to lower prices, then that's when they'll do it. But after they're forced to do it. And Lovelace costs more to make than Ampere. They're not lying to you about that technically. But my understanding is what is now going to be the 4070, what was called the 4080 12 gigabyte, that costs like probably $100 less to make than the 3080. So there's really no reason that shouldn't have been $700 at most or $600. So I guess what I would say is don't kid yourselves. The stuff is more expensive to make than it was 5 years ago, like a lot more. But it's not 4 times more. Like they don't need to charge that much, guys. And if it corrects, it won't be.
Yeah, and I would argue that are they too big and powerful? And no, because people keep buying it. And I don't think anything is changing. I've not seen it change. 40, 80, 12 gig would have sold out or done just fine, honestly. No matter what, all the hate, all the anger, people still would have bought it overall. It would have probably been a successful product. So I think it's the day people say no is when it won't be, but I'm not seeing that behavior. It's funny because I think back to the Pentium 4, and we all basically said the Pentium 4 was a failure. Right. Everybody's like, because one, it couldn't put AMD down in every single thing. And overall, yeah, sure. People would have counted Pentium 4 as a loser product. But you know what? They sold, I don't know how many tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Pentium 4s. Anyway, it didn't matter. I think sometimes I just kind of like that one thing, like it doesn't, when you think of the entire scale, the entire market, it doesn't seem to make that much of a difference. So we're pushing 600 watt GPUs and you got to buy a new case for it. People will buy new cases and buy new power supplies for it because that's what people do. The day you stop doing it, which I'm not seeing happen, then that'll change. But that behavior is not changing.
Did you see the reporting I did on what one of the Titans in the lab looked like?
No.
It had two 16 pins, which means it could pull over 1,000 watts, and it had melted itself. So I think that's the limit. Like when you trip power breakers, which is probably around 600 watts, by the way. I do wonder, and I do think that Nvidia's woken up a little bit, and they're like, we should probably stop at 500. That's what I think they're thinking.
Yeah, we're definitely at the limit of the wall for most American homes. I mean, it's great for Europe. I've seen like these
except that Europe's energy prices are now.
Yeah, you got 240 watt, 220 at the wall, but yeah, it's going to cost a lot more. So that's a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, I just think when it comes to this idea of like AMD, we've seen this before. Nvidia keeps 70 to 80% of the market. I would just say I feel like AMD just always screwed something up. Like they took over 50% against Fermi, but that was basically the last time that happened. And the 7000 series did okay, but they lacked a few features. And frankly, AMD just didn't market their cards at all. So Nvidia just outmarketed them vastly. And then we saw the 290X that beat the Titan. Well, for some reason, they thought they had to be 550 instead of 600. Like if they would have just put $50 more into the cooler on that card, it would have sold so much better, but they didn't. And then we saw RDNA 2 versus Ampere. Some would argue it's a better product than Ampere. And it was more efficient, but they didn't buy up enough capacity to take market share. So they didn't take market share again. And here we are now. We're oversupplied. Nvidia's over leveraged. AMD has an opening to take market share if they have the capacity. So all I would say is this is the time where if AMD's learned the right, it's almost like you could make this like a TV show, and every episode it's a flashback, and it's like the lesson they should have learned in the previous generation. In the season finale, they learned every lesson, and it shows in how they fight them. Like if they've learned the right lesson from every previous generation, I think they can take market share this gen. But Nvidia is a master of marketing, a master of the supply chain and their software. I didn't know about DLSS 3, just pulled that out of their ass. Oh, there's another thing they can use to fight AMD. But it's got to be perfect because Nvidia really is good at this. So I've never seen such an opening, but AMD would have to be perfect.
But then, I mean, I think that's the other thing people really need to consider is like the people making these choices at these companies, they are trying to predict the future. And who would have thought the GPU situation we're in right now? And then
I think they could have. Ethereum had literally a calendar that said when they were going proof of stake. So.
I mean, besides just the mining thing, but also like we are looking at, a global recession that might make previous global recessions look like, oh, those were walks in the park. You wonder if like if you're at AMD, do you go like, yeah, let's double our orders? Like, if you're looking into the forecast for next year, do you want to double your orders looking at next year?
I think AMD did, though. That's the thing. So they're they might have to go for market share, and and Nvidia thought they wouldn't have to worry about it. Like, God, if Lovelace launched in 2021, it would have been the perfect high-end thing for a market that's expensive. But now they're in the wrong market. So it's just like, you can argue it's luck, and it kind of is, but I think AMD lucked out in actually having an option here in Nvidia.
Yeah, if they want to go for market share. But I mean, sometimes you wonder, like, because if it turns into a bloodbath with pricing, then they go like, man, if I could go back in our flashback and go back and tell myself 12 months ago to like not double that order, I wish I could have done it. Maybe that's we don't know what 2023 is going to look like. It could be a heavy bloodbath for everybody because sales are down for everybody and everything, right? Even Apple is like slashing, orders. So it's just...
I know. Yeah, I know. So what do you think that means for everyone else? But the one advantage AMD has is they can use 6 nanometer and 5 nanometer capacity to make Zen 4 or Genoa or RDNA 3. So that means if RDNA 3 does not sell well, they can just go for maximum server market share, which at least for now, from what I'm hearing, the server market sounds like it's still booming, for its own reasons why that would not be affected as much as actually what I hear is do-it-yourself is doing the worst. OEM's okay and server's doing great still. So that is the one advantage AMD also has over these companies is they can literally pivot to anything that makes more sense. But I would argue they're going to try to do the graphics first, and if it doesn't sell, they just make more Genoa chips.
Are they? Is it confirmed that it's tiled part for 7000?
I mean, you ask me, it is. I think they may have literally said something too. I forgot what it was. Did they confirm the stuff that leaker Angstronomics said, and then the stuff I also said, like backing that up? No, but they did. I think they said in a release RDNA 3 is launching with chiplet architecture. So I think they literally said that.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering. I don't remember what was confirmed or not confirmed or just chit chat. So
no, I know it's good to bring that up though because we've been talking about it for so long. Every now and then you need that gut check. Like, oh, did they actually even say that yet?
And then
we're acting like they have.
But I mean, it feels like that's having chiplet is an advantage too, right? They can sort of screw with Nvidia the way they've screwed with Intel. So, if it works out, we don't know if it will or not, but
yeah, and that's kind of what I see moving forward here is if Intel trims the right fat. Again, this is not financial advice, but legally. But if Intel trims the right fat, they can repurpose some of their stuff. They control their own fabs, and they can make it out okay. AMD can just repurpose graphics. They can literally use the same chips for Dragon Range, Raphael, and Genoa. They're the same chiplets. Like, that's crazy. They can just pivot all that depending on what's selling well. Nvidia just bought up double the capacity and paid in cash up front. So I think they would be the ones who would suffer the most from this, though. That's what I would say.
Yeah, but they're also, they know that it's gonna be a storm, but after the storm, the sun comes out, and it feels like they want to prepare for, the jump up when we come out of the storm. So it might work out for them. I mean, they have a pretty good. They've saved a lot of money. It feels like over the last few years.
They're not going out of business, no. No one can suggest that.
God, the funny thing is, I remember going down to Nvidia briefings, and it was just like these little shacks down in the valley, and it was just like, like this. It was just like a wood paneled outdoor. It was just like just tiny. And then what Nvidia has turned into now, it's just like it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that would make me question them really being in trouble here is if they don't have chiplets ready by Blackwell, which it kind of sounds like they might not. And John Petty suggested that to me on this podcast as well, that from what he's hearing, doesn't seem like it. If you ask Nvidia, their answer is we'll do chiplets when it makes sense to Jensen. And I'm like, well, that's a good answer. But, I think if they can get that working to compete with RDNA 4, then I have no doubt that they'll keep doing whatever forever. But that is the one thing I wonder, because it is similar to Zen 1, where AMD made Zen 1 and Intel shrugged. AMD made Zen 2 and Intel made an 8-core that used more energy. And then AMD made Zen 3 perform as fast and still have chiplets, and Intel was out of options. So the one thing I would say is NVIDIA does need to get that chiplet stuff working, I think, because I think we're about to see what happens when you have a cheaper chiplet architecture compete with a more expensive cutting edge graphics one, because we've only seen that in CPU.
Yeah, no, it'll be fun, right? It'll be fun. But, has NVIDIA guessed wrong so far? So, but yeah, no, I really look forward to that, because that really, again, competition is great for everybody. So AMD and NVIDIA competing should give everybody more performance for less money, in theory. Although there may be some...
In theory,
the problem is, like, maybe, the amount of money I'm paying for eggs at the store now may mean it's not going to get as cheap as we have seen in the past.
Absolutely. And I just think that we need to accept that things are just probably not going to do that well this fall because of that. And there's not a whole lot of these companies can do. So if I was AMD, I'd go for market share. And if it doesn't work out right away, I'd be pivoting everything away from it as fast as possible, because this is just not a market that I think wants super expensive products for consumers right now.
No. I mean, I'm thinking back to 2008 during that downturn. And it was ugly. It was real.
Sony was like, the market's booming. Everyone wants a $600 console. And then I guess it did technically launch at the peak of the booming market, but could have been a lot worse if it was 2008 when they launched it. But yeah.
Yeah, no, because of 2008, HP had bought Voodoo, which was that I talked about them earlier, one of those early, boutique companies. And they had launched this massively beautiful case, and it was super expensive, and the entire thing was like high-end, enthusiast gaming PC under HP branding, HP with Voodoo. And they launched that in the midst of the meltdown where we weren't sure we would have a functioning financial system. And I remember talking to somebody at a memory maker, it's like, because they were supplying the memory for it, and they're like, we're shipping like dozens of these. Like, if that's like, nobody's buying these. You got to realize, like, 2008 was bad, and 2023 could be bad too. So it makes you wonder if high end is really where you want to be, or any end. Actually, high end usually does pretty well if you have, low volume, because rich people have money, right? It's the poorer mid-range people that are going to be suffering.
Yeah, it's almost like this is a market where it would be financial suicide to launch enthusiast graphics if you can't compete on all cylinders. But I don't remember what that relates to that we talked
I don't
about.
know either.
Yeah.
I don't, you don't, I don't know. It's just like, it's going to be, we'll see, right? We're going to see this. But I'm definitely a reason let's cancel those other orders. So.
All right. Well, I am getting a bit tired. You've given me far more of your time than you ever should have. I don't think I'm worthy of any more than this.
This is fun. I love talking to everybody because it makes me smarter. Like I talk to people because you're out there, you're beating the bushes. Again, I know you don't think of yourself as a reporter, but you're out there, you're beating the bushes, and a lot of people are listening to what you say. So, hey,
well, yeah, it's weird. I was just talking into a phone 3 years ago, and then I thought maybe I should get a nicer mic, and here we are. But
it's all the microphone.
But let me, you're here. Plug. Tell people where they can find you. Plug as many things as you want.
I will say, so you can go over to read our stories, PCWorld.com. There's also a PCWorld YouTube channel. I have no idea what it is. Go to the bar on top, type PCWorld. Well,
it'll be in the description of this video too.
Be in the description. Go check that out. We do a weekly podcast where we do live things. Just fun audience, and look for reviews. Even though it's going to be stuff coming up, interesting stuff. So we'll see.
There are more products launching per year this year and over the next 2 years than I think there were in the previous 3 combined. So,
I'm sure.
It's a good time to be talking about this stuff.
Also, I would say the one thing I want to say is please thank your hardware reviewer. I've been saying this. Your hardware reviewer is busting his or her ass to test hardware. You don't have to immediately get in their face and demand that they do something this way because they need to do it that way. So,
you don't have to agree with them. There's a reason we have a market with dozens of hardware reviewers. This is their perspective. You don't need to agree. I say the same thing about me. You don't need to agree with me, okay? But I'm not lying. To just use the information how you want. Hardware and Box Gamers Nexus, they're not bought off. Their conclusion is their honest conclusion.
Right. It's everybody has a different perspective. And again, I will say this on all hardware reviews and all news websites like this. Look at everything, apply logic, come away with your own opinion based on your deductive reasoning, but don't just simply buy into one thing and then go into YouTube comments and start screaming about it. So view and listen to it all, everybody.
Don't have your own opinion and then watch the video looking for ways to prove your own opinion and then argue with Steve at Hardware Unboxed.
Sometimes it's better to do it look for things that don't agree with you, right? Because maybe I'm wrong, so just be open-minded. I think the thing is everybody just needs to be open-minded now with the hardware community. Don't go into the corner. If Intel comes out and they're faster, hey, great. If AMD is still faster, hey, great. But don't start screaming at each other immediately because just whatever. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
These companies just want your money, folks. So I will let you go now. Sorry. I've been going on too long.
No, you're good. But yep, thank you to everybody for listening or watching. Remember to subscribe to the Moore's Law Z YouTube channel. Ring the bell button so that you actually get sent the updates that come from this channel. And, consider supporting us on Patreon. You'll get this early and ad-free. You'll get exclusive podcasts like Die Shrink. You'll be able to ask us questions. And I don't know. Thanks for watching. Be nice to people. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, Patrons are what makes Moore's Law's Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law's Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law's Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law's Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Medlin, AV, Anthony Greffa, Greg Pataki, Muhammad Akwari, Brett Jones, Aaron Close, Little Germany, Jan Rauner, Daniel Hyde, Shredbird, Brian Riggleman, Dr. Foreman, Sam Miller, Deke, Thomas Rupp, The Mechanical Philosopher, Terrence Harrods, SNES Chalmers, Tom Bailey, Greg T. Wanchik, Andrew S., Frank Zelinsky, Daniel D., MJB1, Eric Jackson, Justice Brennan, Sammy Good, Valcom Alev, The Boss Haas, Nicholas Buckner, Spantum G. Spantum, Jonathan, Lord Starstream, General Drips, Blake, Franco Frederic, Matthew Lazier, Jensen Wang, Nathan Mose, Aziris, Gregory S. Acker, Dominique Koch, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, Cameron, Christian Lavoie, Hard4Room.com, Original Ross, Slicky, Lance Bassler, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Christopher A. Butler, GZ Ziggy, Sarcastro, Stephen Hart, David Sebastian, Meat and Pork Stew, Tim Robb, Luis Correa, Ian Clifford, Jesse Jaskowiak, Travis Gooding, Holden Mobley, Nanyan, Chris Rich, Deepest Learners, Mads, Utsu Taylor, Stephen Coates, Michael McGee, Chuck Liddon, Semi Malas, Greg, Audrey, Patrick Groh, Amy Will Chief, Brett Summers, Milton, Stephen Dick, Tommy, Kunden, Brucha, Mark Mitchell, McDaffie, Delmain Peterson, James Anderson, Marshall Pierce, Mark Raidmaker, Dave Round, Dave Schultz, 3DS Boy 08, Hal Buma, Norithio, Matthew Landavazo, Stefan Koladik, Henry Zhang, Judson N, Brendan O'Connell, The Grid, Michelle Pell, D31337 Antics, Joseph Kelly, Noe Nicoela, Hexapuma, Chrysantine, Jerome Ferreira, Mayor, D6, Thomas Steef, Miss Precision, DNA Tech, Nicholas Alexander, John O'Shea, Royce Meyer, Charles Russell, Reginald Ari, Slushbot, Tika Autumn, Jackson Miller, JSMMH, Nethra Zink, David Eastland, Cal, Andre Jacques, Gaiman Since Reagan, Jeff Stedler, Jordan Simkovic, Loophole 35, Winstar, Joker, James I. Raider, Corey Leonard, Nail Lima, John Shin, Justin Bussell, Kelvin, Austin Haggerty, Roger Davies, Shay, Julian Leaked, Corey Chappelle, Evan Dingle, C2, John Iverson, Samuel Park, Radiant Technologies Group, The Eternal Dreamers, Jameson, Angima, Mark Central, Derek Lambine, Michael Fours and Pores, John, Robert Davidson, Space Channel 5, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.